so I'm back on the grind. Back up, nigga. 100 bands, get your racks up, nigga.
So in 2013, it was legalized in the United States to propagandize its citizens. What? Like, that's some scary third world stuff going on. That's the kind of stuff that people use to topple governments, to take away freedoms.
Yes, you heard that right. Almost a decade ago, propaganda was legalized in the United States with the passage of the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, which you've probably never heard of. The Smith-Mundt Modernization Act was buried in the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act for a good reason, because it repealed the 1948 Smith-Mundt Act, which authorized the State Department and the mainstream media to engage in propagandizing foreign countries, but it prohibited releasing that same propaganda in America for public consumption. This prohibition was lifted when the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act was signed into law by Obama.
Very simply, Obama gave it a reboot in 2012. So, no matter how outrageous the propaganda may be, it's completely legal.
Propaganda, in other words, a false narrative for whatever specific purpose, is now much, much easier to perpetrate on the people.
Due to the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, which went into effect on July the 2nd of 2013, scripted and orchestrated propaganda can now be presented to the American public as factual news.
Welcome to The Independent Review, a weekly podcast where we bring you the latest from the world of independent journalism. Whether you're a news junkie, a curious learner, or just looking for a fresh perspective away from the corporate media, this is the show for you. So join us now as we dive into the world of independent journalism on The Independent Review.
Welcome to the Independent Review. We have a great show lined up. Today we have clips from Maryam, Henein, Lee Camp, James Corbett, Ryan Cristian, the Indie News Network, Johnny Vedmore, Derrick Broze, and many more. I also want to say welcome back to Doom Mad Villain on his return to Twitter. Let's jump to our first clip with Lee Camp.
This is Mondo Weiss, which does great work on Israel-Palestine. And this article is about how Israeli doctors urged the bombing of Gaza hospitals. Let me repeat that. Doctors who sign a pledge to help other humans, there are many Israeli doctors who endorse bombing hospitals. It's tough to say that sentence and have it actually sink in because you think you misheard it. You think it can't possibly be what you're hearing. About 90 Israeli doctors have signed a letter calling for the bombing of hospitals in Gaza. Only last week, dozens of prominent Israeli rabbis had already assured Israeli leaders that they have a right to bomb Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza, and this week's letter signed by Doctors for the Rights of IDF Soldiers. That's got to be a great organization. What do you think their bowling nights are like? That sounds wonderful. Doctors for the Rights of IDF Soldiers urges the bombing of any and every hospital in Gaza. The letter states in no uncertain terms that due to suspicion of terrorist activity, the hospitals are a legitimate target for annihilation. They claim that ambulances that are evacuating patients to the south in order to be treated elsewhere are at their disposal. So these doctors are claiming that it's okay to bomb hospitals because we told them to evacuate, when in fact, it's impossible to evacuate a hospital, not if you want to keep treating the people who are ill and dying and harmed and giving birth and everything else. The doctors claim that the residents of Gaza are the ones who brought their annihilation upon themselves. No, they didn't. The residents of Gaza are not Hamas, even if you want to say that everything Hamas has done is horrific and unjustified. Many of the residents of Gaza, the vast majority, are not Hamas. The doctors claim they brought it on themselves, echoing the genocidal rhetoric of centrist Israeli politicians who have even claimed that the children of Gaza have brought this upon themselves. That's a direct quote. The children of Gaza have brought this upon themselves. The doctors apply the term snakes, wasps, and terrorist nests in the dehumanization of the enemy, which appears to be expanded from Hamas to the whole of the Palestinian people. And those terms have been used a lot by Israel in order to justify this genocide. By you dehumanize, you act like people in Gaza are not humans, and they're wasps, they're savages, they're animals, they're dogs, and then it's okay. All horrors are justified if you act like they're not human. Now, ironically, a lot of this has a history, particularly during the Holocaust. The Jewish people, my people, were dehumanized, were called all kinds of names, including rats and dogs, in order to justify the treatment during the Holocaust. And here you have Israel, the Jewish state, doing exactly the same, taking a play out of Hitler's book in order to justify their genocidal actions. For those of you listening on the podcast, which is called The Lee Camp Show on Spotify, this begins with Sam Husseini, and this is at the State Department.
Craig Mokhiber, who just resigned as director of the New York office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, noted that intent, usually the hardest part of genocide to prove, isn't in this case. He wrote in his resignation letter, quote, explicit statements of intent by leaders in the Israeli government and military leave no room for doubt or debate. You claim that you want Israel to make the distinction, but you don't seem to be making the distinction. If I might, I didn't interrupt you. The Center for Constitutional Rights just put out a statement. Legal organizations put members of Congress on notice for complicity on genocide. Quote, please take note, this is a letter that they sent to members of Congress, Center for Constitutional Rights. Please take notice that should you vote in favor of that package, the Biden package for Israel, you risk facing criminal and civil liabilities for aiding and abetting genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity under international law, and may face investigation and prosecution. Do members of the State Department face similar possibility?
Again, Sam, as I said, we have the U.S. government has a rigorous process in place for evaluating whether something constitutes genocide, and we have not made that assessment.
But you continue to pretend that the bombing of hospital after hospital, bakery after bakery, university after university, and somehow you keep pretending that, oh, they're just after military people.
Yeah, there is no excuse for why the U.S. is not calling this a genocide. If you look at just about any definition you can find, and as Sam Hosseini points out, many legal scholars have said this is an attempted genocide. They're working towards genocide. They're trying to kill as many people in Gaza as possible so as to force all of them to try and flee south, although many of them cannot get out south into Egypt. But it is a full-on murderous occupation, killing over 400, this is according to UNICEF, over 400 children a day. A day. I feel like I need to keep saying it so that it echoes in all of our heads. Over 400 children a day Israel is murdering right now. And it fits every definition of genocide. And the U.S. is trying to, juke and jive around the definition to say, oh no, it's not. It's military targets. Well, they're really nailing those targets. There was a bad guy underneath the hospital. That's what it was. There was a bad dude sitting underneath that hospital. So we went through the hospital with the bomb to get to the bad dude. It's just garbage. And compare this to how the U.S. will talk about China perpetrating a genocide against Uyghurs. Whereas even this is the kind of bullshit propaganda version of what's going on in Xinjiang province, is like that the Uyghurs are being restrained, put inside prison camps, forced labor, stuff like that. None of that is genocide. But still, the U.S. is willing to call it genocide. And even all of those things I just listed are not true and have been proven false many times, and the sources are ridiculous. But in that case, you have the U.S. willing to call it genocide being perpetrated by China. Then you have Israel literally killing thousands. We are well over 10,000, almost, I think, to 11,000 people, Gazans killed just in a month. That's more innocent people killed than innocent Ukrainians killed in the entire year and a half of that proxy war that the U.S. helped create. So it's just hilarious to see them try and dodge this definition of genocide. Some Palestinians work in Israel. They're allowed, they're given a pass out of Gaza to go work outside of Gaza. Not many, and it's very difficult, but some of them got trapped outside of Gaza when this all went down. They didn't know it was going to happen, obviously, and it happens, and then they're stuck outside of Gaza. Now, they may have liked being stuck outside of Gaza because they didn't want to be bombed, but most of them wanted to get back to their families, whether that meant being bombed or not. I think that's how most of us would behave. Whether there's bombs raining down or not, you want to be with your family. And however, they were rounded up by Israel, and some of them were tortured. Some of them described being beaten. Some of them described being left handcuffed, sitting in the sun without any water for endless hours. But on top of that, perhaps the most striking thing is they were given numbers that were zip tied on their wrists and ankles. And maybe for those of you who are not Jewish, you don't know, or some of you might not know how powerful the imagery is of numbers on humans. But most of us grow up knowing about it because Holocaust survivors still have numbers tattooed on them. That is how they did it in Nazi Germany. They would tattoo the Holocaust, people they were sending to the concentration camps. It wasn't just Jews, obviously. It was Jews, and there was gypsies, black people. Oh wait, sorry, not gypsies. Roma, black people. Anybody they didn't like, homosexuals, anything that was outside of the norm there. Whatever Hitler didn't like was rounded up and sent to. Oh yeah, someone's mentioning communists. That's true too. But they had numbers tattooed on them. So here is Israel with the exact same behavior, not tattoos, but bracelets that you can't take off. And it's just, it really is unbelievable. It's unbelievable that they're behaving like the monsters that their relatives tried to escape. And some of them actually, but obviously many of those who survived the Holocaust are pretty old now. But they're turning into the monsters that they're trying to escape. And something I posted on Twitter, which if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's @LeeCamp, is that we heard never again a lot when I was growing up, Jewish, Sunday school, at the synagogue. You'd hear about never again. And it was not just described as never again for Jews. I always heard it and always understood it as never again, never allow a genocide to happen again against any peoples. Do not sit by and allow this to happen. That's how it was described to me. Never once was it like never again just for Jews. And yet here they are acting like that's what it means.
Our next clip is with James Corbett and his interview with Shelby Hosana on her book Burn Back Better.
It's truly amazing. Once we started lining up in the book, piece by piece by piece, and then you take a step back and you go, oh my gosh, this was a perfect grand design.
You're listening to the Corbett Report. Welcome back, friends. Welcome back. This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com in a conversation that is being recorded in November of 2023 with someone who should be familiar to longtime viewers of the Corbett Report, if from nothing else than her previous 2 appearances on Solutions Watch. We talked to today's guest back in 2021 for a Solutions Watch on how to meet like-minded people, and then again in 2023, earlier this year, for Meeting People is Easy, both of which were talking about a website that she co-founded that hopefully, again, you will be familiar with, called Unjected at unjected.com. But today we're going to be talking to her about something very different, a book that she has just co-written called Burn Back Better, Lahaina, A Perfect Storm or a Perfect Crime, because although you didn't know it at the time, because there was no real relevance to this information, Shelby Hosana lives in Maui, and unfortunately had a front row seat to the tragic events that took place there this past August. And here we are in November, and there is already a book about these events that you can get from unjected.com. The link will, of course, be in the show notes for today's episode, so you can go there directly to purchase your copy. But let's bring her on the program. Shelby Hosana, thank you very much for joining us today.
Aloha, James. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to see you. I wish we were talking under more happy circumstances, but, I appreciate you helping get the word out about Maui.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're exactly right about that. I wish we were talking in any other kind of circumstances than this. The truly horrific, tragic events that took place there just a couple of months ago, and unfortunately, in many ways are continuing with the cover-up and obfuscations and the still tragic consequences of that event still playing out. So let's set the table for this conversation. Obviously, we're going to be talking about in some detail about your new book, but let's start by just talking about your own family personal experience with this. As I say, you live in Maui, not in Lahaina, although you do have personal connection to Lahaina. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I first came to Maui over 10 years ago, Lahaina was, my landing spot and my stomping grounds for almost 5 years, where I was living and working right off of Front Street, and, got to know many of the, beautiful people that ended up being victims in this fire. And even my mom still worked in Lahaina, to this day. And so she was actually there on Front Street the day of the fire, and I'm so thankful to know that she's okay and that she's here today. But when she had come home with her harrowing story about what the police were doing, barricading people in, and how she was essentially paraded into the fire, it was just apparent that very day of the 8th, when you combined the fact that no one was warned from the siren system, I was shocked, hearing her story of the day and unpacking just the last few weeks with her. But, we have known, unfortunately, a lot of people that have passed away. And like you said, it's still unfolding every day with what we're finding out.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the 24/7 news cycle being what it is, a lot of people who were following and interested in this story aren't anymore. So unfortunately,
Right.
This is the nature of the news cycle these days. So let's bring some of these issues to people's attention, or at least bring some of this information back to people's attention. Let's start with a little bit more detail about your mother's story, because you do go into that in the book. And I think it's a good way of getting a handle on the absolute craziness of what was happening that day. How did your mother get out that day?
Yeah, well, definitely by the grace of God. But, what had happened is she had made it out to Lahaina very early that day, around 7:30 in the morning. So well before, the fire had consumed the town. But already she had described that there was gridlock that early, and the power was actually already out in the town. So there was already just this kind of feeling of, chaos in the air, especially for the tourists visiting, the locals trying to get to work. And so by the time she did make it to work, finished her day, it was around 2:30 in the afternoon. And when she went to leave, she saw a plume of smoke in the distance. But, there was not this, she didn't quite know the severity of the situation because, as we just mentioned, the police were not showing the concern to get people out of Lahaina. And where she works specifically, is right towards that highway. So she should have been able to exit, quite immediately. But just like many other people, they were barricaded in. And, so the fire started at Lahaina Luna Road, which is kind of the main road that comes into Lahaina town. And so it's a thoroughway from our bypass, which is only one way in and one way out of Lahaina. If you're familiar with Maui, it's very common to actually get stuck in Lahaina. This is something that people are used to, and that law enforcement should have been prepared for. And instead, when the afternoon continued and the flames crept closer and closer to Lahaina, instead of seeing a massive evacuation plan, they were essentially just kind of parading people in circles. And every road in Lahaina that day was blocked by a police barricade, by an electrical barricade, where they were just trying to set up power lines in 80-mile-an-hour winds, if you can believe that, let alone just barricades of just cones that were actually just preventing good citizens until they finally realized something is wrong here. And it was the locals who actually broke the barricades. Those were the people who survived. And, my mom circled each inland street in Lahaina town because she was thankfully familiar with it. And finally, when she went all the way back in a full circle where she started, a local had knocked down the cones, and she was able to follow them and get through. And she made it out about 15 minutes before the town was completely gone. She had actually passed her boss on the way out, who spent the whole evening in the ocean. And, that's kind of the second part of the discrepancy is, these stories that we hear from the survivors don't reflect, what the media told us in our 24-hour news cycle.
It's such an incredible story for so many reasons, one of which is just to reflect on the fact that, once again, like, for example, on 9/11, the people who made it out were the people who weren't listening to the authority figures. Oh, go back to work. It's fine. Just stay here. No, it's absolutely terrible. And it's tragic to think of all the people who did comply and sit there and unfortunately were consumed by those flames. Absolutely terrible and tragic fate. And it raises so many questions about that police response. And in fact, there are so many questions about what happened that day, many of which you do raise and tackle in this book. For example, why were the sirens not sounded? Emergency, one of the greatest emergency systems on the planet, apparently, but not sounded that day. Where are the children? Why was there was officially one deceased child for how many weeks after this took place? Mayor Richard Bisson claims he was unaware of the fires until 12 hours later? What? Why were communications shut down? Why was the water shut off? Why was the Maui police chief brought in from Vegas, where he had overseen the Mandalay Bay shooting cover-up, and then given a raise that was beyond even what he had asked for? What is happening here? There's so many baffling questions. Let's start tackling some of those questions and get into some more detail. I don't have a particular one that I want to tackle here, just all of these things. Tell us about what's going on here.
It's truly amazing. Once we started lining up in the book, piece by piece by piece, and then you take a step back and you go, oh my gosh, this was a perfect grand design, just as if we know that they're good at doing. Practice makes perfect. And these globalists, or whoever these people are who are, wanting this disaster capitalism to occur, they were eloquently laying the pathway once we took a step back. And, yes, Pelletier, he was the chief of police in the 2017 shooting. And actually, when he came to Maui, there was a lot of discrepancy with the police force here, where most of our police force that was here, seniority, they left because of the abusive nature that they described being under Pelletier. Not to mention, which we get into in the book, that he's also the ordained coroner of Maui. We actually don't have a medical examiner. And so he is doing the job of police chief and coroner, which is just a complete obstruction of justice. And, he's claimed himself that that's why this won't be investigated as a crime, because no crime occurred. And, like we had said, Maui was familiar to this kind of natural disaster. We had a siren system that was the most robust in the whole entire world. And on their website, it states it's for terrorism, lava, tsunamis, and wildfires. Yet, where were they? And we know that they worked because it was kind of the local joke that, on the first of the month, we'd hear the tsunami siren and we'd say, oh, it's time to pay our rent. It's, there's the rent siren. And the fact that the fire raged for hours and nobody, took it upon themselves to sound that, it makes it feel just absolutely deliberate, because it was the elderly at home with the children while the parents were at work in Lahaina town. And, these people were the least able-bodied to escape the fire. And why weren't they given a warning? And, there were some police evacuations, but not until it was far too late. On top of the fact that the water was gone, it was turned off. They claimed they wanted homeowners to leave their homes and not fight the fire, but yet they left the firefighters empty-handed. And when it really gets 9/11 vibes, where we get in, especially when we talk about where the officials were the night of the fire, they were not on island. And you're right, they claim to not know about any of the destruction until the next day. So who were the police taking orders from? And, that's something that just kind of keeps you up at night. Where were these orders coming from if no one knew? Before I ramble too far, where was the military? We are 100 miles away from Pearl Harbor, which is the largest military base here in Hawaii. We should have had hospital ships, ships with water pumps coming to help put out the fire. They could have been bringing generators and supplies, yet none of that happened. And, I fear especially once we put all of these details into the book and we started looking at this, that it's more than just gross incompetence, in my opinion, that it is criminal negligence in so many ways.
Right. Well, one of the things that I appreciate about this book is that you acknowledge that there are, as you put it, 3 camps when it comes to this. Camp number 1 consists of those people who believe this was an intentional fire set by criminals. Camp number 2, don't be crazy. Smart people never let a crisis go to waste. Of course, people will try to buy up the valuable land. That town was a tinderbox. It was an accident waiting to happen, and they just pounced on it. And then camp number 3, Lahaina, is that in Maui? Oh yeah, that wildfire was so tragic. I heard that up to 100 people died. So that unfortunately does kind of cover the spectrum, but I do appreciate that you bring up both points, for and against all of the different camps and their different viewpoints regarding the intentionality of this, or was it just a perfect storm, or was it a perfect crime, I believe is the way you frame it in the book. And there are points to be made on both sides of this, but when you line all of these dots up, at any rate, as with so many of these events, it in a certain perspective, it doesn't matter whether this was generated crisis, 100% completely fake, man-made, or whether it was 100% totally natural and man-made, not man-made at all, or some admixture of the two. At any rate, they are absolutely pouncing all over this to forward various agendas. Let's talk about the way that they have kicked people when they were down with the gracious $700 payouts that they were giving to survivors of this tragedy, versus the billions and billions and billions they're shipping off to places like Ukraine and Israel to help them fight their wars. It's absolutely disgusting, but let's talk about the way that the survivors have been handled in all of this.
Yeah. And, that's, I think, one of the biggest shining lights is this recovery process and the way the victims and survivors have been treated. Also, and at least for me, myself in Camp 1, it shines just even more culpability on it. Right after the fires, where was the presence, like I just said, from the military? There was National Guard that did arrive, but not until days later. Most of the people here, the local citizens, were left to actually clean up bodies of loved ones, just to give them dignity, because they were in the sea and they were on the street and they were left there. And what were we going to do? They weren't going to leave them. And, not only that, the trauma and PTSD of that, but the water was completely bad and no electricity. So essentially cut off from communications, water, food, shelter. These people were in survival mode to the fullest extent. And us on the other side of the island, I live on East Maui, which is about 30 miles away. Anybody who tried to come even from this side or from neighboring islands was turned away by police, by National Guard, and you were told you would be shot if you tried to bring supplies in to survivors. And, think about like Hurricane Katrina. Did that ever happen where people turned away and told they would be shot by going to help survivors? And instead of this recovery process, they were actually just building a large wall in Lahaina. Instead of looking for bodies and helping, they were essentially building a crime scene wall. And to this day, the $700 is all that they've received. There's been many nonprofits and funds that have been going on around the island, but as far as the federal government, no assistance whatsoever. And when you combine that with Biden saying that they're laser focused on getting help to Maui, it's just offensive. $700 is a grocery run here. And so right now people are facing a massive housing crisis. Many people have already been denied insurance claims. The insurance companies are saying, oh, well, your house wasn't up to code because it was too close to the ocean. And now all of these red tapes and these things are coming out, or condominium owners who had, maybe 20 different people with different insurances, they're not getting payouts either. And so right now the state has this interesting position, which we definitely dive into in the book, which Josh Green seems to have set himself up pretty carte blanche to be able to seize this land for people who are unable to rebuild on it, or even come out of this recovery process. And so it's actually just devastating to see what's going on. We still have survivors being housed in the hotels, but over the course of the next few months, they're not going to be able to stay there any longer. So it will either bring a large exodus or a large unveiling of truth for a lot of people.
Well, let's certainly hope that there is some unveiling of truth that comes out of this at the very least. But you mentioned the phrase laser focused. Well, on that note, as you allude to there, you are in Camp 1, that this was an intentional fire set by criminals. But as people would argue, well, Lahaina, certainly no stranger to wildfires, and the fact that it was a tinderbox waiting to happen, essentially, all of that is acknowledged and understood. What makes you believe that this was not simply just another natural occurrence?
Well, I am one to, of course, be skeptical, being from Unjected and being in this medical freedom world anyways. But, when you take a step back and you start looking at all the pieces of evidence and also what they've gone to as far as covering evidence up, even pilot logs are being erased off of the air traffic control websites from 8/8. Satellite imagery from NOA is gone. So, there's just a lot of really interesting, precarious things. And even just like 9/11, where we're still 20 years later going, wow, here's a new piece of evidence. It seems like that's just happening every day and almost a hyper speed. And, do we know if it was a directed energy weapon for certain? No. But what we do know is, interestingly enough, Maui is home to one of 2 directed energy weapons here in the United States, which I can actually see right from my window here. It's the Amos facility right on Haleakala, which the Space Force and the Air Force love to talk about. We do know that directed energy weapons can be mounted on airplane noses quite easily. Maybe is that why pilot logs are being erased? When also you just look at some of the evidence that was left over, cars, engine blocks being melted, steel melted, just like in 9/11, a fire that melted metal. That was actually something that Pelletier said in one of his conferences. Melted glass in areas where the fire wouldn't have been hot enough to rage. And so, it makes you scratch your head. And when, unfortunately, too, these victims are found a lot in vehicles. They were not able to get out of cars. Animals are found flash frozen. There's a lot of questions to be asked about how did this happen? Why couldn't they flee the fire? And do I believe that maybe a technology was used because it's a perfect petri dish? I that's kind of why I am in that camp, just because Hawaii is such an isolated, little place in the middle of the ocean. And if you cut off communications here, you can really put the magnifying glass over us as the little ants and say, what will they do? And, I think, like we said, practice makes perfect. And this isn't build back better. This is burn back better, because this is when humans don't have a fair playing ground, they use fire to get even. And we've been doing this for centuries, in the beginning of time, burning down empires and people and civilizations. And just because this is modern time, I don't believe it's any different. And, if they can burn us into the areas they want us to go, we're more easily controlled. And so,
and of course, you do play on that build back better idea, which of course has been seeded into the public consciousness in recent years, and I think is, again, we could turn to a parallel like a 9/11, where, well, we have these white elephant twin towers. It's going to need tons of money to get the asbestos out, all of that. Well, hey, maybe there's a plan to build back on this exact spot, but we just need to knock these towers down. Well, could there be a similar agenda at work here? Tell us about this, the 15-minute city, the plans for rebuilding and redeveloping Lahaina.
Yes, well, I fear that definitely is a possibility. We dive really deep into the book with actually some of the proclamations, but Josh Green went out of his way before the fires, actually in July, which is very precarious, who signed an emergency proclamation that gave him the ability to seize land that was or uninhabitable due to a natural disaster. How convenient, just 2 weeks beforehand, and essentially when we took a look back, we saw, in January of 2023, they actually had a smart city conference in Kaanapali, which was just 10 minutes away from Lahaina, where the whole town is now gone. And, 1 week after the fire, Governor Green was over in New York discussing how Hawaii was going to usher in the smart city and the green city. We're calling him Governor Green New Deal, because, it's right in front of our faces, and he's been going out of his way to talk about it for some time now. And, Lahaina is what I've heard, ranked the second most valuable land in the whole entire world, real estate wise. It's just the most gorgeous, pristine, beautiful place you could imagine, that's been in the hands of generational Hawaiians for thousands of years. And it was not sold out by corporations. These were mom and pops, families that were holding their ground here. And was it easier for them to clear the land and just get them off so they can have a clean sweep? I hope not, but it sure feels that way. And
it's the kind of thing that the average non-psychopath could not even possibly imagine. But unfortunately, our lack of imagination, our lack of understanding of the threat that is posed by people with truly no empathy for other human beings is, unfortunately, to our detriment. Absolutely unthinkable. But as you say, that was one of the aspects of this that I must admit, when all of this coverage was happening, I didn't pick up on. But yes, I'm glad that you put the emergency declaration here in the book and you reproduce it here for people who didn't see it. Yes, just weeks before this happened, an emergency declaration what emergency was happening? Who knows? Who cares? But hey, in the event of a disaster, we'll be able to come in and claim this land. It's absolutely, it's certainly puts I think a lot more people in camp number one that we were discussing earlier.
It's mind. Yeah.
But as I say, I appreciate that you included that emergency order in here. All of the things that we're referencing here, pictures of the melted metal and all sorts of survivor testimony, etc., etc. This is quite a compendium of information. And the thing that strikes me about this, we are here in early November. I mean, this is only a few months ago, and you already have a book out compiling all of this information. I can only imagine the type of work that goes into putting this together in such a short time frame. Tell us about how and why you decided to publish a book on this so quickly.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a collection of us of souls that have been working just tirelessly, and of course, Stephanie Perucci, she is just an absolute incredible author, and I thank her so much for helping push this out as quick as she did, and the incredible skill that she has too. But what we saw was actually, I think it was day 2 after the fire, there was actually like an AI generated book that was produced about the Maui fires that was all about climate change and pushing the climate narrative about how the town was gone because of, essentially Build Back Better, the opposite of what we're talking about. And then once we started seeing, even myself, when I was speaking about the fire, I was being censored and deleted. Survivors, their testimonies were being deleted and gone, just scrubbed. The pilot's testimonies gone. And it was just, they're going to rewrite this narrative just as if they've done so many times before, and they're going quickly at this. And so we just all said, we need to make sure that this story doesn't go untold, and we need to tell this correctly so we can help the Hawaiians get their land back, one, but so we don't lose what really happened here. And so it was a tremendous amount of work, so many hours of deep diving, and as you've noticed in the book, everything is cited with resources, and you can actually go and watch even videos of the testimonies and go look at documents that we've provided. So it's actually like a full dissertation or textbook of this criminal investigation, in my opinion. And we anticipate that it will grow even into maybe more volumes as we learn more. But this was just the accumulation of the last few weeks of what we felt was the most important pieces that need to be out there for people to just have that thought-provoking moment of, doesn't matter what camp you are in yet in this moment, but ask these questions and dig deeper, because this isn't just Lahaina. What does this mean for the rest of the world? And
exactly.
What is the playbook here? And even like we just saw last week in Acapulco, that was a hurricane flood, but guess what? They were on the Smart City Conference list earlier this year too. So, we just need to, as citizens of the world, open our eyes here and go, okay, what is the playbook? What's going on? And how do we protect ourselves from Build Back Better? Because we know that's BS.
Yeah. No, and if that was your intention, then I have to say you were successful, because as I was reading this, I thought, well, this is kind of a strange book. I've never read something quite like this, because it is a compendium of so much eyewitness testimony and descriptions of things that were being reported at the moment that it was being reported. And here it is just a few months later in book form. And I remember at the time thinking, well, is this a good idea to be publishing so quickly? But as I continued going through it, I realized, no, this is an absolutely excellent and really important idea, because as you allude to there, this is in physical book form that cannot be flicked off by the censor switch at some big tech platform. It's going to be out there and in paper format and distributed all around the world. So good on that. And also, it is, I think, valuable to have, especially in this age where so much information is electronic and ephemeral, and people might see some post on Twitter and then never see it again. It's good to have this in some sort of collected compendium form, because as you admit in this book, you can't come to any definitive conclusions at this point because the investigation isn't finished. But here's all the pieces of the investigation that we have right now, and here are all the pieces on the table. And I think that's a valuable compendium for people as well. So I really do think this is a good idea, and I hope this does inspire more people in the events of things like this to be doing this type of work, trying to put it collected and put it in a physical format for people. I think it is valuable on that front. And as you say, you're trying to bring this to the attention, not just obviously people who are already involved and interested in this investigation, but to people more generally, because it is applicable to people around the world, people like myself in Japan and everywhere else around the world. So if you had a moment to address people in the audience who haven't thought about or particularly cared about what happened in Lahaina to this point, what would you say to them? Why is Lahaina important?
Yeah. Well, even like I'll use myself as an example. I was one that never paid too much close attention to the natural disasters around, natural disasters, quote unquote, we see them going around, oh, something's on fire here, or, like Paradise City in California, gone. And you go, why are the trees standing, but the buildings are obliterated? And why are all of our food processing plants being burned? And you start looking and, I was one that I even myself being in the freedom community, I wasn't paying close enough attention until it happened right in my own backyard. And then I went, wow, they really, these people are going to stop at nothing for this depopulation agenda. I was focused on vaccines, but here it was in my backyard as disaster capitalism. And, so just, even if it's something that you haven't thought of yet, just to stay vigilant, and not in a fear-based way, but just in knowledge is power. And if we can see what these game plans are, we can prevent them from going further with their nefarious plans. And I believe they do everything symbolically. They love to use astrology to their advantage. They love symbolism, and I think that Maui was an ushering point. They say that Maui is the mother womb of the earth, and they wanted to reproduce their evil, nefarious activities by starting somewhere like here. So I still feel like there's hope. And we are on to them, and they know that. And so, just like 1984, unless they want to burn all the books, they can't do that. We're going to be able to come together and tell the real stories. What happened in California? What happened in Greece or Acapulco, or what happened in Lahaina? These are all similar events being orchestrated by in my opinion, people in the shadows. And the sooner that we catch on to them, the less destruction we'll face, and we'll be able to have a greater reset, not the great reset.
Well, if we perish from our lack of understanding, then books like this will hopefully contribute to the understanding we need to prevent this from happening again in the future. There is so much information in here, including history about Lahaina and so much more that we haven't had time to cover in this conversation. So I hope people will get a copy of the book. Again, it is called Burn Back Better, Lahaina, A Perfect Storm or a Perfect Crime, co-authored by Shelby Hosana and Stephanie Perucci. Shelby, where can people get a copy of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find it on shopunjected.com. It's actually our new merchandise swag store. So if you'd like to see any other Unjected stuff, you'll find it there as well. Grab a copy, or if it's easier, you can get it on Amazon. We don't like to support Bezos, but well, you can if you want to. And so yeah, shopunjected.com. And then, of course, you can find me just over at unjected.com always.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time today, and thank you for putting this information together so quickly. I hope people will check it out, but we'll leave it there for today. Shelby Hosana, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for helping get the voice of Maui out, and I really appreciate it.
Next, we have a clip from the Indie News Network on Free Palestine.
Who are these people?
This next segment. So you, and hopefully me, at least for a minute, will be planning to attend this watch on Washington, D.C. Coming up on Saturday.
Right.
We've seen, and everyone who's been on Twitter and anyone who has watched mainstream media knows that there's been a lot of protests regarding the Palestinian resistance, I will say, you know, for the last few weeks. There was a huge one in London, I believe it was last weekend. I can imagine this one in Washington will probably be just as or around as big. So you're going to this, Joe.
Yeah,
so,
just to talk about the international support that we've seen so far for these protests. I know London had over 100,000 people. I know a couple of people that attended. There was a huge protest in Brussels, Belgium also. One of my good friends, my friend E.T., she is a student at a university in Leuven, Belgium. She's originally from Estonia. She attended the Brussels protest. There was a massive protest in Berlin, Germany over the weekend, but we didn't see much of a conversation about that in the mainstream legacy American media. There are protests taking place all over the world, especially in various parts of Europe, in support of Palestine. And I want to be clear when I say this. Just because you are pro-Palestine, that does not mean you are anti-Israel or anti-Israeli. I'm going to make sure that when I specifically say that, we pro-Palestine, we're pro-Palestine. Okay, fine. There are plenty of Israeli people that were also, Hamas also murdered a bunch of Israeli people. And that's not good either. There's no two ways of getting around that. We can't, if we're going to go ahead and admonish what Israel has done to Palestine, we must also admonish what Hamas did to innocent Israelis, because every life is supposed to be important. We're not placing one life over another. I don't want to do that, because if we do that, then we end up with these asymmetrical arguments about everything, and it just gets too convoluted. And I'm trying to make sure I simplify all of this as much as possible.
Well,
even though
it's complicated.
That's
like with that.
It is.
Every Israeli citizen has to be a part of what, Joe?
The United States military, not the United States military, the Israeli
IDF.
military. Yes.
So we can claim those were all innocent civilians, yet all of them spent time in the IDF and probably still, you know, and this is on top of, there's a lot of propaganda surrounding that whole event to begin with. Hamas says they didn't target civilians, you know, that this was crossfire situations and Israel making it bigger than it was. And, you know, we also know Israel has been known to make false flags. If you look at the Lavon affair, if you look at, you know, there's a lot surrounding all this. So I get you. Innocent loss of life sucks regardless.
Right.
You know,
but I think innocent loss of life sucks on either side. That being said,
do I understand?
That's what I'm getting at. Yes.
And
the need to like fight the oppressor in any means necessary, like kinda, you know, like you've spent since 1948, innocent lives of Palestinians have been lost and lost again and lost some more. So, you know, do I think eye for an eye is worth it? No, but you know.
But this is what I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
In terms of your interview with Ben. And we experienced this as international Black men. Like, in terms of...
I already know where you're going with this.
ADOS and FBAs view us.
Yes.
Like, we have... There's kind of like this internal struggle among us that we need to kind of deal with.
Correct.
And so along with that, there needs to be a serious conversation with Western Jewish people. Now, and I've seen, and I've talked to, like, as I said, I've been talking to Indy. I also know a few people who are Jewish that might sympathize with the Palestinian struggle.
Oh, here you go. I got you. I got exactly what you're about to say. Hold on. Let's bring
I'd rather you not
the
say
terrorist organization.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, I have this from everyone's favorite bean pie supporter, Malcolm X, when he was asked about the Mau Mau terrorists in Kenya.
Well, this was a terrorist organization that didn't just defend themselves from specific acts, but initiated acts of terrorism. Do you favor that in this country?
No, I think that the conditions that prevailed in Kenya forced the Mau Mau to take action. And any action that they took, even though it seemed that they were initiating it, actually it was a defensive action. And it was a reaction to the colonial powers that were exploiting them.
But do you favor such an organization here?
Does white America favor the Ku Klux Klan or the Citizens Council? And as long as the government, police bodies, do nothing about the existence of white terror groups that are terrorizing blacks, then it's time for blacks to do whatever is necessary to put these white terror groups in their place. And I feel that a Mau Mau could wipe out the Klan in the north, south, east, and west, and wherever it exists. I'm not against the idea at all.
Well, this was a...
So... You know,
I mean, so, but given that, what Malcolm X said in the past, the conversation needs to be had, in my opinion, among Western Jews who, and I've seen a few online, and I get how you need to kind of show solidarity with Israelis who you share a faith and you share a culture with in terms of your religion. I totally get that. And I understand that. That being said, if you cannot speak in truth, and I'm saying this to, well, I've seen a lot of, Jews here who have been pro-Palestine who have been very outspoken about this. So
arrested,
I'm not
censored,
right.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who might know, who are very aware of how Zionism has used their faith as a vehicle to justify the current genocide of an indigenous group in the Near East, and are not willing to elevate that conversation so that there can be a little bit more understanding, and I would argue more solidarity among themselves in terms of how to move forward and deal with this reality. I think it's going to be a tough conversation. Yes, it will. But I think at this point, it's a conversation that needs to be had. And for me, and it's the argument of, and I think a lot of people are saying, to me now, like, we feel like we supported you guys, the Black people, during George Floyd or whatever else. You're not supporting us now. And no, it's not that we're not supporting you. It's the idea of people are against capitalism. We're against colonialism. We're against the very system that would cause an uprising like this. And as Kwame Ture said, and I played a clip from him several weeks ago, where I think it might have been a Jewish heckle or whatever, but he said to that person, if I am a slaveholder and you're the slave, and your means to freedom is to kill me, would you do it? Like, so the question is, yeah, I think the idea of, yes, it's horrible to see bloodshed on both sides. However, there's a narrative that's being pushed mostly in mainstream media that it's one-sided over the other.
It tends to be one-sided. It's just not the side they want to portray it as.
Right. And the issue that I have is, I think the main thing, if we want to keep it simple, who controls the resources? It's not Palestinians.
No.
And it's not even Hamas. They're a resistance group. It's the Israeli government with our funding, as you said, with our tax dollars. And I'll make this argument, especially for the FBAs. I said this before, the FBAs and ADOs who are like, oh, that's their fight. We have nothing to do with it. Your tax dollars.
Yeah, similar
instead
to
of giving
Al
reparations
Qaeda,
to you,
ISIS, the
your
Viet
tax
Cong.
dollars that could be going towards student loan debt is going towards the occupation. Your tax dollars that could be cleaning up our schools is going to Israel military. Your tax dollars that is paying for their universal health care, right? To be damned that we can get universal health care here, but Israel has universal health care on our dime. So,
in an Iron Dome on our dime, Israel wouldn't be capable of defending itself without us.
Right. Which is why even in this, I hate the idea of ceasefire to me, like this narrative of like, yes, I want it to stop. But the question I'm asking is, if you stop it, then what happens? Number one, what do the terms of a ceasefire look like?
Right.
And I will say, according to the West, are you willing to cut aid to Israel in order to get that? I haven't heard of anything of the sort at this point. So it's more control of the narrative, and I think that's something that we also have to push back on in terms of like, and I think even this weekend, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion of, yes, we need a ceasefire, but ceasefire to me means nothing if it means continuing to fund Israel for potentially continuing this war, and then humanitarian aid that, and I'm going to say allegedly, that's supposed to go to Israel. How do we know that it's going to go to them?
This next clip is from Maryam Henein and Courtenay Turner on the history of Tavistock.
Educate you on how things really work. So, Courtenay, maybe we can start by, how did you come across John Coleman?
So it was in the middle of 2020, and I woke up in 2020. So I always make the joke that it took me a really long time to find this train station. And then I found the high-speed rail, and now I've been scrambling trying to catch up. But in 2020, I found myself really depressed. I'm like, oh my gosh, everything I ever thought I knew is a complete lie. And I started going down a million rabbit holes trying to figure things out. And a friend of mine called me. It was literally midnight. He sends me a text, and he said, "You heard of Dr. John Coleman?" I said, "No." And he says, "Watch this and then call me." And it was midnight. And I was like, I don't know. I start watching. Of course, it was riveting, and I couldn't stop watching. And then we were on the phone till like 4:30 that morning. And after that, I realized he had written 30 monographs. So I started getting all of his books, and I saw that one of them was retailing on Amazon for almost $5,000. I was like, that seems kind of curious. Looks a little bit like modern day book banning. Just make it so expensive that the masses can't afford to buy it. And I'm like, what is it that they don't want us to know? So I found a PDF, and I read that literally 3 times in a week because I found it so incredibly riveting. And that was my first exposure to Coleman. But for me, I think part of why it was so captivating was because I had a very strong background in psychology and philosophy and the arts, as an actress. So it kind of converged all 3 of them, and it made me realize how much I've been lied to in all of my what I thought was education, but really seemed like indoctrination.
I also went on Amazon. I offer it on Maryam Henein, not for $5,000, but as little as $5. MaryamHenein.com. But I also was like, why the hell is this $5,000? Hunted for it, found it. I've read it 1.5 times. I'm about to print it out to read it again. And it also, I minored in psychology, and it's like you can't go back asleep. But
No.
I feel like a lot of people don't understand how they play both sides or the beginnings. So let's talk a little bit about how it started in the Wellington House,
Mhm.
and it involved the Milner Group, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and then it kind of progressed into Tavistock. Can you talk a little bit
Sure.
about?
Yeah, I would add the Crown, Lord Milner, Northcliffe, and Rothmere. Is it? I think it's Rothmere. Yeah.
He was
so,
a lord?
What?
He was a
He was a
lord?
lord.
Okay.
So was Lord Northcliffe. Yeah, they were both lords. So I usually start a little bit further back, actually.
Okay.
I start with the Leipzig University and Wilhelm Wundt, because
Who did you say?
Wilhelm Wundt.
Okay.
Wilhelm Wundt, who was known as the grandfather of psychology.
Okay.
So in the United States, the American father of psychology is known as William James, who was the first PhD student of Wilhelm Wundt. Wilhelm Wundt himself never had any degrees or, any formal education, but he created the PhD program. And he had many very famous students, one of being William James. And I call it kind of like the pinnacle of the indoctrination system. And when you see some of his students, they might be very familiar to you, like Stanley G. Hall, who was a mentor to John Dewey. John Dewey, who was very instrumental in exporting the, what is known as like the three-tier Prussian model of education that was designed to breed what they called mindless obedient soldiers. And it was born after the Battle of Jena, which was during the Napoleonic Wars in 1807. The soldiers rebelled and they lost the battle. And they decided they lost the battle because the soldiers rebelled, and they thought that they rebelled because they were critical thinkers and they could no longer have this. And so they needed to create an education system that bred obedience. And this was exported out to the United States. Some of his other students were Pavlov, like the Pavlovian experiments, Pavlovian responses. Who else was there? Oh, so I always bring up that Wilhelm Wundt's grandfather, and I look at this because I can never pronounce the name. His grandfather's name was Kirchenrat Karl Casimir Wundt. Wundt is, it's German, so it's W, but it's Wundt. And he was a known member of the Illuminati. His code name was Raphael. And this, for anybody who's doubting it, can look up Illuminati Provincial Report from Utica, September 1782. And it was documented there. And I bring this up just because I think that it's, that's not necessarily directly incriminating evidence that they're executing the plans of the Illuminati, but there's a lot of continuous threads that seem to be aligned with that line of thinking. And like I had brought up, Stanley G. Hall, who was one of his students at Leipzig University, was also a mentor to John Dewey, who was the co-author of the Humanist Manifesto in 1933. Humanist Manifesto is one of the big Tavistock journals. And a lot of the principles that he espoused were things like Adam Weishaupt's notion of thou shalt do what thou wilt. So, which was also very like Adam Smithian. A lot of these philosophical precepts stem from this very similar line of thinking. So from there,
is it true that it's hard to get the Human Manifesto?
The Humanist Manifesto, I haven't really tried to get that one.
Yeah.
I have tried to get, there are a couple of Tavistock publications that are pretty hard to get. I had one of them, I don't have it with me, but it's with Eric Trist and I forgot the first name, but Murray. And those are kind of like the manuals for the organizational operational research, and they're very thick. I have one of them because the other two were pretty expensive and very hard to find. But Eric Trist, just for those, was a psychologist who was very instrumental of Tavistock, but he was also the father to Alan Trist, who many may know as the producer for the Grateful Dead. So I don't think it's any coincidence that the Grateful Dead was how they conducted a lot of those LSD, Timothy Leary, kind of, they were they were experimenting with mind control and psychotropics and psychedelics. And
when I found out that Woodstock and the counterculture was, that's also Tavistock. The Beatles also
Yep.
Tavistock. I needed a couple of days of cognitive to recover
Yeah.
from the cognitive dissonance, and I think it's just too much for people to wrap their.
So according to
Yeah.
Eustace Mullins and to Dr. John Coleman, it was Adorno who wrote the lyrics for the Beatles. I haven't seen like direct confirmation of that other than both of them saying it, but it wouldn't really surprise me. But yeah, I was kind of in the same boat. I really liked them. I liked the Grateful Dead too.
Right.
I think I was at someone's house. I was at our friend, the Dyer's house, and he was like, "What kind of music do you like?" I'm like, "Whatever the CIA made." He was like, "That's all music." I'm like, "Okay, fine."
Right.
You know, I'm like, they do it well.
They
you know,
do it. They do it well. I think that before Courtenay goes on to the next era, that this new world order has been long in the making, and that I personally think that there's been an acceleration because of technology.
Yes.
And under the Rona regime, they've kind of put their feet on the gas pedal, but that this has been in motion, and they must be really happy with all they've accomplished in the past 3 years.
Yeah, I would argue that as well. And so just to drive home the point about the Illuminati, you know, I know a lot of people think that the Illuminati went underground, and we actually have a clip from Dr. John Coleman where he says, you know, it actually went to 1994. I don't know his argument behind that, but I do know Leo Zagami, who I've interviewed many times, says that the official like school of the Illuminati, I don't know if that was the official name that he gave it, but he's something to that effect, started in 2002. So yeah, and he said it is tied to, it's the same messaging, the same, you know, descendants of those people. So but I would also say that a lot of these organizations, not just the Illuminati, they go underground and then they rebrand, they have different names, but the agenda still carries out. And that's honestly more important, I would argue, whether or not the official name is, you know, yeah. But the Illuminati, so the Illuminati then became, when it technically, supposedly did get shut down, it then became, there was an offshoot, it was the League of the Just, which would be translated like League of Just Men. It was helmed by Engels and Marx. And I see them as kind of like the, you know, one of the first kind of modern, you know, relatively, I wouldn't think it's not
Right.
modern, but, you know, relatively recent codifications of social justice warriors. You know, I don't think that idea is necessarily new, but they really codified it. And then from there, it became the League of the Outlaws. And from there, it was Communist League, which was helmed by Engels. And Engels he was commissioned to do this Communist League, and it was very much predicated on Adam Weishaupt's Illuminati Manifesto, as well as Clinton Roosevelt's The Science of Government Founded on Natural Law. And this is a book by Dr. Emmanuel Josephon, and he draws the parallels between the original Illuminati Manifesto and then Clinton Roosevelt, who, of course, was a cousin of FDR. And yeah.
So we're still in the 1800s, mid 1800s now?
Yeah. The Illuminati Manifesto, I think, well, the Science of Government Founded on Natural Law was 1841. Illuminati Manifesto was in the late 1700s. So, but I bring them up because I want people to know what the plans were back then, and these things that are being carried out now seem very similar. So Woodrow Wilson, who of course was very instrumental in Tavistock, he was the first president, United States president, to use the term New World Order. But if you look at some of these, are just 5, and I think there was actually a 7-point plan. But in this book, it outlines 5, and I don't have the other one that outlined all 7. But it's very similar to what we think of today as being the Great Reset, the New World Order. You know, it's had many names. So the first one is abolition of monarchies and all ordered government. 2, abolition of private properties and inheritances. 3, abolition of patriotism and nationalism. 4 is abolition of family life and the institution of marriage and the establishment of communal education of children. And 5 is the abolition of all religion, of course, because they want to bring in the one world religion under a one world governing body.
At this point, are they focusing on the destruction of America or not yet? No.
No, that they are. This is just my speculation, but I think that they are very much aware of the plans of America, because Weishaupt officially formulated the Illuminati in May 1st of 1776. And right. So I think he knew what was there. So there are 2 books. There's Proofs of a Conspiracy by John Robeson, and President George Washington used that book to warn the Americans of the Illuminati infiltration, the Masonry. And then there was Proofs of a Conspiracy, and Thomas Jefferson used that book to warn. And I think that's so much of what the Constitution, the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists, a lot of what they were fleshing out was what they saw in Europe.
Protect themselves.
Yeah.
Wow.
But of course, the conflicting, it really was like, you don't know. And everybody had different opinions, which is also, I think, why George Washington in his speeches warned against us having the party system, the 2-party system, because he said that was going to be a loophole for foreign entanglements.
Wow.
And I think he learned that from watching what happened with the infiltration of the Illuminati and the Masonry, and what happened with the Jacobins and the French Revolution.
So as I was reading about Tavistock and even John
Mhm.
Coleman's Committee of 300, which I'm not done, what came to mind is like they're trying to they started to destroy America before they had even built it up.
Yes.
So
yeah. Well, that the first White House was burned down.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Right. So they were attacking us really hard from the very beginning. There was a lot of tear down and build back up from the very beginning, because it was I think, that's why I always talk about the Bill of Rights, because a lot of people talk about the Constitution. The Bill of Rights is really what makes our country so unique, because it's the first document of any nation to be predicated on this notion that we are endowed with inalienable rights from our Creator. And that was what really, I think, what they were trying to fight against. Another thing just to add about the Illuminati is that they really wanted to attract deists. And they did say their reason for this was because they saw it as a stepping stone to atheism, which was then a stepping stone to occultic, esoteric worship.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that's that's not like, I'm just connecting dots, and you draw your own conclusions from there. Of course, 1886, Freud coined his talking cure. This became the staple method, the signature Tavistock method. Of course, we think of it as like talk therapy now,
Right.
But they did that along with psychotropic drugs as they merge into the field of psychiatry, which of course was very relevant as they move into the Tavistock medical psychology and the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations under the grant that Rockefeller provided, which then made that possible. All right, so then where do we go from here?
When did they create the Wellington House?
The Wellington House was around 1912, 1913. So you had 1909, the Secret Intelligence Services, which was the MI, British Intelligence Service. Freud and Jung visit William James in the United States. 1885, the American Society for Psychical Research was founded. And Jung and Freud were honorary members, and William James was a founding member. So they come here, they start that. And then in the Wellington House, it was, they had appointed Charles Masterman to head up this British Propaganda Bureau. And it was known as the British Propaganda Bureau. And the purpose of this was because Germany had a propaganda bureau. And typically they do this, right? It's under the guise of defense. And I always make the, kind of half joke that if they put a D in front of it, they have a Black Ops carte blanche budget, they can do whatever they want. And unfortunately, what we find out later is that a lot of that research, so wartime research, does get weaponized against the people, and it's often done in collusion with the very people that they claimed we were being defended against. Not always, but oftentimes we do see that throughout history later in hindsight. And with the Wellington House, they created, it was also known as the Lie Factory. And it was literally designed to create propaganda in order to sway public opinion of the Britons as well as the Americans in favor of engaging in World War I, particularly on the side of the British. And they helmed up. So the first thing they did was Masterman they used art as usual to sway public opinion. Back then, as you were saying, the technology changes, right? So back then, the printing press made print more accessible. So they invited literary figures such as, I'm just going to put this in silence so that it's not buzzing, but they brought 25 very famous literary figures in order to do 1,600 pamphlets and write books that would be pro-war sentiment in order to sway the public opinion. And the names were people you would probably recognize today, like H.G. Wells. Rudyard Kipling was invited, which was always very sad to me because it was like my all-time favorite poem. Chesterton was one of them. There was a whole bunch there was 25 of them. They were all very, very well-known, prominent writers. This project stayed secret until 1935, and there were 1,600.
I mean, arguably, there would have been no First World. There wouldn't have been a war.
I don't think there would have been, because I don't think there would have been the justification for, there wouldn't have been the popular opinion. There wouldn't have been the justification to finance it, much like kind of what they do today, right? They have to garner acquiescence from the masses in order to give all of our tax money to go fund, foreign aid for whatever war. So I don't think there would have been. They also did things like weaponized terms. I know a lot of people are very familiar with the term conspiracy theorist being weaponized today, and that comes out of the CIA's document 1035-960, Countering the Warren Commission. And this was to avert any investigation into the JFK assassination, and you'd be labeled a crazy conspiracy theorist. And of course, we saw this resurface with a vengeance, lots of fervor in 2020. Yeah. And they did something very similar in 1916. They weaponized the term isolationist, because Wilson ran on the campaign that he would not get America into the First World War. And so, of course, what were they doing? They were advising him. They actually set up something called the Creel Commission in order to advise Wilson. And they appointed Edward Bernays, who was a double nephew of Sigmund Freud, the man who wrote the book Propaganda, often known as the father of propaganda, although I think Willy Munzenberg deserves a lot of credit in that direction as well. And then Walter Lippmann, who is a journalist, to head this Creel Commission under George Creel, who was also appointed to helm the whole thing. And the point of it was to sway the popular opinion of Americans in favor of engaging the war. And they used the term isolationist to weaponize people who, wanted America to mind their own business and not engage. And we saw the resurgence of this under Ron Paul, when he was, one of the first libertarians to really garner a lot of popularity, particularly with the political right. And of course, they couldn't have that. And I remember this with my own father, because I would talk to him about Ron Paul. I'm like, I think, he says some things that kind of make sense, and it sounds like things you might like, Right. And my dad was like, he's got crazy ideas about foreign policy. We can't have that. He's an isolationist.
Wow.
Yeah. So I really remember personally, I just remember that really well. But that comes out of 1916. Tavistock weaponized the term, for anybody who is, because he was they were advising Wilson to engage in the First World War. And Creel was an interesting figure because, of course, what did he do after, heading up this department? Also, interesting thing about Bernays, he's the double nephew of Sigmund Freud, used a lot of Freud's psychological, research in order to create PR tactics. And his nephew is the founder of today's modern propaganda machine, which is Netflix.
Wow.
Yeah. So
can I interrupt you?
Yeah,
for a
please.
second? Why is it so difficult for people to realize that it's all like, even it's two different sides, it's one coin? And I just want to interject and say, because you mentioned the journalist. So I just put forth a series on anthrax. And as I was reading, I came across George Webb, and then he references an article that I went and I looked at. It was in Rolling Stone. It was now scrubbed. So the journalist, I mean, he wrote really well. Then I looked him up. His name is Noah Strackman, and he's now the editor-in-chief of Rolling Stone. He was the editor-in-chief of the Daily Beast, and there were scandals like in Rolling Stone that they hung Eric Clapton. They put him as an anti-vaxxer and shamed him. But my point here is, like, when I was reading, he was also integral in writing about the anthrax letters. My conclusion was like, oh, this is a journalist for the FBI. So people might think like, oh, look, Walter Cronkite, or look at these faces and trust them as journalists.
I would make that joke. I'm like, the boomers are like, Walter Cronkite would never lie to you.
Right. But they seem to capture journalists too. So
yeah, they do.
I mean, today,
Operation Mockingbird is, direct evidence of that. Yeah.
This next clip is from Ryan Cristian and his interview with Kevork Almassian.
Hezbollah. This is directed to, in my opinion, to Syria, one. And the second, also possibly against Egypt, because they want to intimidate and blackmail Egypt to receive 2.2 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip and house them in what Ayalon, the former deputy foreign minister of Israel on Al Jazeera, said in these beautiful camps that they're going to establish, refugee camps in the desert, so that they reallocate or relocate all these Palestinians to the Sinai temporarily. Wink, wink. Right. I mean, who are they fooling? You know, it's so clear what they're trying to do.
And the leaked documents that have come out that have all been verified. I mean, WikiLeaks has confirmed that it's a real document, but ultimately that it's every aspect of this plan is literally in effect and happening. So it's obviously they're not going to come back. They're trying to push them into the Sinai Desert. I mean, it's a very, all of which are war crimes, forced displacement. I mean, everything that's happening. But what's interesting to me, back to the topic we're discussing, is so what you're saying is two things. One, it seems like, which is just a classic seemingly Western kind of action to, we'll just murder this guy because it will give us political points, you know, like that kind of argument. So that seems to just be like a really basic concept that would line up with historical actions. But what would be the political benefit other than that? Is there anything in your mind other than just showing that they have power coming up in an election? What do you think it would accomplish even to assassinate Assad right now with the current dynamic?
There are many things they can accomplish if they assassinate Assad. First of all, they give the biggest service to Israel, which means if Syria falls, if Assad falls, the alternative is not 99%, it's 100% is going to be a friendly government to Israel and to the United States. Of course, if Assad falls, who is the opposition to Assad nowadays? All these talking heads on televisions, they are under the payroll of Qatar, they are on the payroll of the CIA and the payroll of the United States. And all these Soros organizations that are funding the independent journalists, independent politicians, we all know, like you go to their websites and just click on about or who is funding them, and you can see the foundations, all these foundations that are affiliated to NED, USAID, and all these Soros organizations, right?
Right.
The alternative to Assad is going to be a friendly government to the United States and to Israel, and this geographically means that the next government, if they manage to remove Assad from power, he will close the borders between in front of the Iranians, because remember what the Americans are doing in Syria. They're not only stealing the oil; they have another military base on Al Tanaf border crossing. Why? Because they want to block Syria's trade routes and also the lifeline of Syria to the east. Right. And when they do that, they're blocking Syria, this connection between Tehran, Baghdad, and Damascus and Beirut. So the Syrians opened a new border crossing in Al-Bukamal. And remember, just a few days ago, when Biden gave the order to bomb Syria, they bombed exactly that border crossing because they want for this border crossing to be closed. And if this border crossing is closed, then Syria will no more be able to get any sort of aid, whether it is trade relationship or military aid from Iran. So that's going to be one of the things that they will block this, which means Hezbollah will be isolated, and eventually the Palestinian armed factions will be isolated. So this is the biggest service for Israel if they do that. The second thing, of course, for the United States, this is very, very important. If Assad is gone, Qatar will extend its gas pipelines through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, Turkey to Bulgaria. And you will see that Qatar will provide the necessary gas that the Europeans need in the next years. And they will no more be in need for the Russian gas. Up until this moment, the Europeans are buying Russian gas from black market, from the Indians and from the Chinese with higher prices, and the liquefied natural gas from the United States. But if they can bring it from Qatar, cheap gas from Qatar, they will no more need. There is going to be no need for pipelines from Russia anymore. This is also the plan of the Americans, right?
Right. This is a really interesting. I've often made this point that at some point, there's these classic concepts like in Iraq that, it's a war for oil, which is never that simple, right? But these concepts were generally accepted. There's a huge factor there. But at some point along the line of conversation, everyone acted like, oh, that's passé. It's not about oil anymore. It's about X, Y, and Z. But it's never really been the case. Like what you're tapping, I mean, it is. There's a lot more moving parts to this. But oil and geostrategic control never stopped being wildly important to the dynamic. And so what you're highlighting here is that this is very clearly still tapped into these long-term plans about pipelines and control. And I guess what I'm saying is it's interesting how people act like that's not part of this. And we're looking to like biosecurity and, they're really there now, the Great Reset, and these things all overlap, but these parts still matter very importantly to the strategic control of the area. And so that's really fascinating to me, is that obviously isolating Russia in this in the same way and blocking them off for that. It's really important, I think. But I guess to my other point too, is that, and it almost kind of explained it with your explanation there. I was going to ask, would that even deter Hezbollah? But your answer then is if they were able to accomplish that, it effectively would cause this cascade effect that would affect them. And so that's interesting, but still the same question with all of that. Do you think that will deter Hezbollah from entering something that it seems they're already very clearly involved in?
Hezbollah is directly already involved in this conflict.
Right.
They are firing the ATGMs like they are eating candies, and this is a really important question. If they fire 200 anti-tank rockets in the past few days on Israel, how many anti-tank rockets do they have? If I am in charge of the military affairs in Hezbollah and I don't have 20,000 units of this weaponry, I'm not going to fire 200 units in 2-3 weeks against the Israeli tanks and armored vehicles, right? So Hezbollah is already part of this conflict, but people need to understand what's the role of Hezbollah in this. The role of Hezbollah, from their perspective, of course, this is not my wishful thinking, I'm just analyzing. Hezbollah's role is to keep 1/3 of the Israeli army busy in the north and in southern Lebanon, in North Israel, southern of Lebanon. Because if the Israelis they called all their units to go to Gaza, they have around 350,000 soldiers, let's say, and now around 150,000 of them are busy in the north, because if Hezbollah intervenes in this conflict, people need to know what Hezbollah is and how Hezbollah grew in the past since 2006. If they intervene and they wage a ground offensive, what we have seen from Hamas on the 7th of October, it's going to be like from a child playbook, as Scott Ritter said the other day. And he is correct on that, because Hezbollah are 100,000 fighters. They are ideologically very, very strong, and they are very, very disciplined, and they have a very long combat experience in Syria. 12 years of war in Syria against the most vicious terror groups in the world. And above all this, Hezbollah has anti-tank rockets, sophisticated ones. They have anti-aircraft missiles. They can gun down the F-16s of the Israelis. They haven't used it yet, but you will see it if there is a regional war. They have ship cruise missiles. They have Yachont. Yachont is a very sophisticated missile that the Syrians bought from the Russians, and then all of a sudden they end up in southern Lebanon. It's like everything we get from Russia in Syria, it goes to Hezbollah. And they're a very strong and disciplined army. I think if Hezbollah intervenes, Israel will need the intervention of the American forces.
Right.
And they will need it because Hezbollah and Syria, they are able jointly to neutralize the air bases of Israel. And if that happens, from where the Israeli warplanes will operate? From the American aircraft carriers, right? And this is one of the reasons why they are in the Mediterranean. So if that happens, we are faced with a regional war, and the regional war with global ramifications. And as I told you, the Russians already sent their message. Syria is a red line. Their presence in the Mediterranean is a red line. Assad is a red line, and they are ready to engage with the Americans through these hypersonic missiles. I think maybe it's just I'm being naive here. I think the Americans have no strategic interest at the moment for the war to expand. They don't want it. In my opinion, maybe I'm naive. I think the Israelis are dragging the Americans into this conflict, and they're bringing them. Yeah, I think so. I think the Americans are not ready to open big war in the region. All their interests in the Gulf, their companies, the flow of the energy resources from the Gulf countries, there will be huge financial crisis, energy crisis around the world. And the United States is already printing hell of a money to sustain its war machine, let's say, in Ukraine and now in Israel. So I think if there is a regional war, financially speaking, it's not in the interest of the United States to get involved in such a big war, because the economy will be exhausted, and we will see huge inflation in the United States. And at the end of the day, the Americans then need to have also air bridge to bring all the sort of weaponry to the Middle East, whereas the people of the region, they're there, their factories are there, their weaponaries are there. And it's quite obvious after this Gaza onslaught that even though some of the governments in the region, like in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and the rest, are just being in the middle or sometimes pro-American, let's say, but the people in the region, the public opinion in the region it's so sharply now against the Americans and against the Europeans, something we haven't witnessed before. It was pretty obvious now that for the Americans and for the Israelis and for the Europeans, the Arabic people, they're just like flies. And if the Israelis kill now like 4,000 kids in 3 weeks in Gaza, and the American administration says there is no red lines, you can do whatever you want in the Gaza Strip, then this sends a message, clear message to the people in the region that the Americans are not their friends. I'm not talking about the ordinary people, but the deep state in the United States. They are very, very, very vicious, and they're trying to save themselves and keep their hegemonic status. And I think this is the beginning of the end of the American empire. I'm not saying that it will collapse, but they will not be able to rule the world unilaterally like they used to do in the past decades.
Yeah, I agree. And to your point about, the normalization deals, and I know we have limited time, Egypt is a good example of that, where, at least in my opinion, like in particular regarding Israel, where you have this extreme, like obviously pro-Israel stance from the government, from the elitist perspective, but the people, as far as I understand it, it's aggressively anti-Israel kind of, and that's the government again, not about, that they always try to make these about the people and the individuals because it pits us against each other. But I think it's interesting is even in regard to the whole entire current conflict in Israel, in occupied Palestine, is around the world, you're finding the example that you've got governments that are aggressively pro-Israel to the point to where they're calling it taboo to even call for a ceasefire, when you can prove that, at least in this country, it's 60% of every category is calling for ceasefire. So it's like they don't even care what the people think. And I've always tried to make people see that. Now, just last question before I let you go here is that you mentioned the secret base as well. The U.S. The Intercept covered the secret base that the U.S. is building in or around Israel, close to Palestine, occupied Palestine. And so it's interesting to me that we talk about the assassination of Assad, but your point is that all of this being done and the aircraft carrier seems to almost be kind of like trying to taunt Iran into what's going on. But those in a way almost seem contradictory, right? Because if argument being that they would force them in if they took action with Syria, but they're almost kind of, so how do you see those playing together kind of in the last point? Do you think they want Iran to come in, or is that sort of a taunt to, how do you see it?
There is a contradiction between the statements and the actions. On one hand, they say for Iran, don't, this was the quotation, don't And
Really
at the
stupid,
same
by the way.
time, yeah. And then Kamala Harris, she, oh my God. Like sometimes I wonder if the Americans know that their leaders have become the mockery of the world when they speak like that. They need to understand that the time has changed, and Iran is not afraid of the United States, and the rest of the people are not like intimidated by the United States. And the message was clear in the past 2 weeks. The American forces in Iraq, in Syria, and in every occupied areas, they came under fire. Up until today, they're firing against them. So this is the message from Iran. If the Americans will intervene, they will of course intervene in this conflict. The Iranians do not want to open a regional war in the region, but the flow of all these soldiers, special forces to Israel, the expansion of this secret military base near the Gaza Strip, bringing all these warships and aircraft carriers and nuclear weapons to the region again. I mean, those are not an indication that the Americans are willing to de-escalate in the region. They are getting ready. And as I said, this is not America's war. This is Israel's war, and the Americans are coming to help their ally. I don't want to say any other words, not to be fined here in Germany, but they're coming here to in support of an occupation, illegal occupation. Under every UN charter, every UN resolution says Israel is an occupation force. And they are aiding this occupation, and they're aiding the murder of, look, I don't like to play sensationalism, but if you watch the footage from Palestine that on social media platforms, how can any person with the minimum humanity not feel sick in the stomach seeing all these kids, newborn babies are coming under the rubble, shattered bodies everywhere. And then with a straight face, they come to the media and they say, like, Israel is trying to minimize the civilian casualties. No, they're not trying to do that. They're trying to drag the Americans into this war. And I think the Americans understand that. And now we can see that they're speaking about the end of Benjamin Netanyahu's political career. But do not underestimate Netanyahu's psychopathy. He could drag the Americans into a war, and then we will see hell on earth in the region. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that, but believe me, after decades of intimidation and bulldogging against the people, like, what are you doing in Syria? Like, you're like a pirate, stealing the oil, blocking the trade routes of Syria, blocking the Silk Road initiative of China to reach to Syria. It's like you're just there to impoverish the people and keep them poor. And people know that. People are not stupid in the Middle East. If you ask anyone in Syria, like 100 people in the street randomly, you can speak with them the way we were speaking right now. People are educated. People know politics quite well, you know, and people know what's happening, and they're fed up. Of course, they're angry at the government because the government cannot provide them with the basic necessities, but they also know the source of this misery, right?
I agree. I know you got a hard out in like 1 minute, so I don't want you to be late, but I will just end with the fact that I personally think that there are entities within this that definitely want some level of destruction and terror and horrifying things to happen. That's my personal opinion, but I think this comes from extremist elements within a lot of these Western governments, and it's a problem. We have Lindsey Graham literally saying it's a religious war, level it. I mean, come on, you know, it's very clear where they're at least presenting themselves. But so I'm glad that we have people like you that can be analytical and objective and cover this information. So thank you for joining me, brother, and we'll connect again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, brother. I will always be in touch with you, and it is my pleasure to be with you.
Well, thanks, brother. And as always, everybody out there, question everything, come to your own conclusions, stay vigilant.
Next is a clip from AM Wake Up with Steve Poikonen, Chris, and Scott Armstrong.
Speaking of terrorists, I don't know if you've seen this. I just seen this. I got to go into the article, but supposedly this is footage from an IDF helicopter on October 7th. Have you seen this?
Oh, over the concert?
Yeah, they're just taking surveillance. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen the footage, no.
Okay, yeah, it's just surveillance footage. Just it's surveillance.
That certainly doesn't look like surveillance.
Yeah, they're just fucking looking at what's going on. Because, you know, terrorists were down there. Terrorists were down there, so they were just surveilling. So I don't know if that's totally confirmed, but I'm seeing that this is saying it's confirmed. It's going to come up in Israeli. Can I get it in English? Let me see if I can switch to English because I cannot speak this. I don't know how the fuck. There's a way to speak.
I'll speak terrorist.
How the hell do I make this English? Now I can't fucking remember how to do it. Okay, someone in the chat, could you read this to us?
Hey, who speaks Jew?
Yeah, because I can't. But it's very, I would say, how do you say believable?
I mean, credible that that's the Israeli army helicopter just massacring people trying to flee.
Yeah, because that's not like someone took the WikiLeaks collateral damage and just colored the screen green.
No, I've seen collateral damage 10 billion times.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now this one's gonna give us we got it. Hamas deception IDF helicopters and directing pilots on WhatsApp.
Oh, so it's Hamas's fault.
Okay. See, they were surveilling.
And then
And
somehow
they thought they were
Hamas
getting Hamas, but Hamas threw cell phones under the fucking cars. So they thought, okay. The first helicopters were actually launched from the north of the country and arrived in the Gaza Strip about an hour after the fighting began. The terrorists were instructed not to run so that the air would think they were Israelis.
It's just bad translation.
Yeah, it's perfectly made for me. The pilots shot over the sides of the fence and also right inside the settlements. Pilots received information from the ground on cell phones. I didn't even read that far. I made that part up. In 4 hours, about 300 targets were attacked. Black Sabbath events. War pigs, they said, come flying through. Anyways, yeah, so it was totally Hamas's fault on that one. They really fucked up with the whole, you know. So wait a minute. It didn't say that they were, they killed, you know, the Israeli concert goers. They blew them to pieces, right?
This whole time I've had Black Sabbath. The last 30 seconds I've had Black Sabbath playing in my earbuds too, because I was gonna try and work in a little bit when I saw it in the article.
Oh man, you know what the best one is? Puddle's Pity Party. Look that up. War Pigs. His version.
Yeah.
Oh,
Although, okay,
put that
let's
to
do
some
it.
war.
Let's settle it.
footage
You
and
pull up.
holy
I contend the Cake's cover is better. You pull up Puddles. I'll pull
Let
up
me
Cake.
I'm gonna get Puddles. Let me get the. We're gonna do something later. Supposedly the. Oh, Wisconsin. With this, I was gonna show the supposedly the flight logs have been dropped.
The flight logs have been dropped.
Yeah, the Epstein flight logs have been dropped.
Okay, well, Scott's here.
116 pages, pretty detailed.
Before we do that, just a couple of points. Let's see. I think this is the one that I want on why it's a bad idea to incorporate the banjo when you're doing war footage.
Well, anyway, let's start. I mean, let's not waste any more time.
We'll bring Scott in right after this.
Is this on? Can you hear me out there? Is this mic on? Are we having going on? Okay.
We can bring Scott up, I guess. Ladies and gentlemen, the host of Rebunk and Unjected, Scott Armstrong.
What's up? What's up, fellas? What a great intro.
People forget that Steve Martin was a banjo
Not a happy sound. It was just. You just can't sing a depressing song when you're playing the banjo. You just can't go, oh, death and grief and sorrow and murder. When you're playing the banjo, everything's okay. Hey, Steve, your house is burning down. I just thought the banjo was the one thing that could have saved Nixon. He went on television right at the right time, went, "Hi, everything's great." But I think it'd be great if he had been traveling around the country and got off the plane and said, "I'd like to talk about politics, but first a little Foggy Mountain breakdown." Then it go to
So yeah, Chris, that's why you don't have banjo with your war footage. It's just too happy of an instrument.
Yes, that's you use the Gaza war footage with
Oh God.
that banjo. That's
The Hayseed Dixie version of War Pigs. Yeah, it doesn't work as well. Scott, my friend, how's it going? It's fantastic to see you. I miss your face. You're very busy.
What's up, guys? Well, thank you so much for having me on, man. I'm great. Always a pleasure to be with you and the team and the crew and the peeps in the chat and everything. Very cool.
Oh yeah, we had a fantastic conversation with your I guess collaborator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
You're on a naughty thoughts list.
Exactly. Yes, we're all on the naughty thoughts list for sure. But yeah, no, Shelby's just been doing amazing work for a long time. I'm grateful to be able to help her with her endeavors and everything. So, and then the book's out now, and yeah, it's great. I mean, it's not great, but it's like it's cool. It's cool. I was able to help put out a book. Kind of crazy.
Oh yeah.
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 But you know, the subject matter is like kind of a downer. But you know, if people are interested in the topic of Maui, Lahaina, and everything like that, like I would say it's the most comprehensive text there is out there that kind of consolidates everything that we know right up to this point. A lot of exclusive stuff. So anyway, yeah, people are interested in that. Point is, we don't want to let it like die in the headlines. You know what I mean? We don't want it to just fade away and not be something that anybody's considered. Yeah, there you go. Shopunjected.com is where you can order it. But really what it is like, you know, and kind of the idea being is like as information continues to develop, like so much crazy stuff. Like, for example, like the governor of Hawaii, Josh Green.
Yep.
His Halloween costume, he dressed as Darth Vader for Halloween. I don't know if anybody caught that, but Shelby sent me like a reel that he posted. It was like he's like the literal Darth Vader of like out there. Everyone like considers him like the Darth Vader character, and he like literally dresses as Darth Vader for Halloween. It's just like, dude.
Yeah, it's, we're in the mocking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
mocking part of the Mockingbird media.
Exactly, and even since this book came out, you know, there's still more information coming out. Like in terms of, apparently, there's a lot of just in the last few days, like Hawaii News, local Hawaii News is reporting that a lot of people's insurance claims on their homes are being denied, saying they didn't have the adequate proper type of insurance. Which, of course, we were anticipating that from day one.
The thing that really blows my mind is the change of lineage on the birth certificates and the documents, right? She was telling us that some people have found that on their birth certificates and stuff that they have changed, that they're no longer natives of Hawaii.
Oh my God, I didn't know about this.
Like
this must be new. Yeah, I didn't know about that.
Is like, I mean,
Whoa.
you can't get more evidence of a straight land grab and terror organization, if we're going to start using that fucking word.
Oh, totally.
You know, we
terrorist organization that burned down, you know, Hawaii and fucking vaporized people and disappeared memory hole people.
Thanks for submitting your DNA after the fire.
Yeah.
We have ran it by our friends at 23andMe, and we've determined that Pacific Islander actually technically means originally Japanese. So you don't have any claim to Hawaii because you're technically you're Japanese.
Wow. So thanks to 23andMe, huh?
I don't know about the 23andMe part for sure, but I do know that they did have everybody submit to DNA, and if what Shelby's saying is correct, and they have been altering birth records after the fact, then somebody's gonna be like, well, how did you arrive at this conclusion? So they're going to have an answer, but they have an answer waiting for them in a couple of different DNA test companies that go straight back to the NSA.
And that just made me think of like 23andMe and Ancestry.com. How much are they doing that to people in regions where they have claim to land and stuff like that?
Yeah,
right.
I have
And
no
then they
idea.
send in I want to get more of my lineage, and they send in a 23andMe, and it comes back, it's like, oh yeah, you're not actually, actually part of the land at all.
Somebody test
exactly
this
what
out. Go
terrorists
online right now. Start saying really nice things about Israel. Then start talking about how nice it would be to be able to do your birthright citizenship thing, but you don't know whether or not you have any legitimate claim to it. And keep saying nice things about Israel. And I bet if you submit your DNA,
card will just come in the mail.
It'll come back saying that you're enough % Jewish to go get yourself a little settlement. Now, once you get there, you can collaborate with Hamas and other groups inside the Palestinian resistance. It's a long walk.
It's a long game. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fascinating though. Yeah. That I didn't know about the whole bloodline thing out in Hawaii. Like I'm gonna have to ask Shelby about that because that's fascinating. And it just checks out.
It makes
of
sense
course,
too, because if everything's vaporized, I mean, it's like Building 7. Building 7, they had all the physical, not all, I'm not all, but a big chunk of the physical records and documents from the FBI, the CIA, and shit. This is at the beginning of digitizing those documents, and then gone.
Yeah, exactly.
So those are gone. And then I wouldn't put it past this terroristic organization to then go through digitally, using internet and online criminal activity to change these people's lineage, to then steal the land from them.
Yep, and that's the main, I think, one of the main overarching things.
Terroristic than that.
Yeah, that's one of the main overarching things of the whole situation is the land grab aspect of it. The idea that prior to this event, all of this land was designated, off limits and historical, and so now that it's been torched and demolished, it's potentially up for grabs. And now that the insurance claims are being denied and people are being displaced and people don't have the resources or any means to claim what's theirs to begin with, there's a big push to have people just forfeit their land or sell it off. And I was just in Maui a couple weeks ago, for about a week and a half, and everywhere you go, you see signs that say Lahaina is not for sale. Like the locals are very aware of the fact that this is a very deliberate land grab, and just things like that. The fact that they're changing records, and the only thing that I could think of to that is to eliminate people's legitimate claim to that being their land in the first place.
Yep.
So they're just every single aspect of this, they're trying to chip
100%.
away at people's claim to this land. So they obviously want it for some reason.
Yeah, we don't care what your records say. We don't care what your historical tradition says. We don't care what you've been doing. We have a website.
Yeah.
And according to our
you gotta
website,
look at
you're not what you say you are. You're what we say you are. So that's what the courts are
And we're
going
the
to go by. If
experts.
this, yeah.
We got white coats on. Look at white coats.
Where's your white coat? I don't see you in a white coat. You're wearing a lei. That doesn't make you any kind of a professional other than perhaps a swaying dancer. You can't prescribe a goddamn thing. So clearly, we're the experts here. So next time, you better come with a white coat, motherfucker.
Well, out in Lahaina and Maui, the authority figures were wearing the white coats. They were wearing like military fatigue, so they were the military people. It's like, nope, you don't get to do what you don't get to do what you want to do. This is our place now.
When going out to Hawaii now,
Yeah.
how are they dropped the whole vaccine thing to fly into? Okay.
Yep. I didn't have to do any
I
sort of
would
masking,
think so.
testing, vaccine, anything like that.
It's just fucking so fucking. Oh my.
Yeah. Apparently Hawaii was one of the places that was the worst of the worst out of every place.
Sweet honeymoon. And it was just.
Oof.
I'm just kidding. I didn't.
Oh, okay.
I wish.
You know what's funny is I did go on my honeymoon
Invite me
to Hawaii back in like my mid to late 20s, but I went by myself. Because
Okay.
yeah, I went by myself.
I have to hear that story.
Dude, it's hilarious. So I was engaged to this gal, and everything was great. And then like, we had the wedding paid for, the honeymoon. So the honeymoon was a week in Hawaii and a week in Disneyland, and it was great. It was awesome. And then like, just like
A
literally,
week
like,
in Disneyland on your honeymoon?
yeah. Well, see, we were just gonna go play around.
That's a
you know,
red flag, Scott. That's a red flag.
I was young and dumb. I had no idea about any of this stuff, dude. So, I mean, you know, she wanted to go to Disneyland. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's do a week in Hawaii and a week in Disneyland. So there you go. So,
On my Twitter bio, it says enraged by Disney adults.
I know, dude. Trust me. I'm
what-
enraged at myself for having fallen into that trap.
No, that's
And then what
fantastic. That's
happened
how we
with
learn.
this Disneyland loving fiance?
Okay, so and then so the funny thing is that we all work together, right? So her and I work together, and then about like maybe
There's
a couple
policies against that.
well, you know, and I was actually like a supervisor. Well, anyway, and then I find out that she was cheating on me with another guy we worked with. So it was like all in the same
Hence the
thing,
policy,
dude.
Scott. Hence
Exactly. And so that kind of is a long story, but ultimately what happened was that relationship didn't last. But I still had the time off work, and the honeymoon
This
was
is a
paid for.
fucking movie, right? This is
Well,
it really
listen,
is.
listen. Okay,
Now-
I'm not even joking. This is gonna get even crazier. So this was like 2009, maybe like 2008, 2009, and I went. So anyway, I had the time off work, and then the vacation and everything. So I'm like, dude, I'm going by myself. I don't even care. So I just went by myself, right? Hawaii, hanging out, just. And this is back when I was drinking a lot, and I was like, I don't even remember much of my Hawaii trip. I was just like getting hammered, like in the hotel room or just walking around the beach. I have like little glimpses of it. But I remember one day I was just like, I'm just going to watch a movie in the hotel room and just chill. And there's this movie called Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Oh
right?
my God. I was just.
Yeah. And it just came out. I'm like, oh, I heard this movie's kind of funny. So I'm like, oh shit. So I'm like watching it, and I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me, because it's literally a movie about a guy who like breaks up with his girl, goes to Hawaii by himself, and I'm like sitting in Hawaii watching this movie. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here, dude? And so I was like, okay,
Run into your fiance,
but I didn't run into her. That would have been too much. That would have been too much. Yeah. But I didn't run into Russell Brand either. But
Fortunate. That's a
Fortunately,
good thing. That's a good thing.
Knew it was a fucking movie. That's
But anyway,
crazy.
that you know, that whole situation was kind of a disaster, and like, yeah, it was no fun.
But
Kind
at
of
least-
ultimately led to me deciding not to drink anymore. A couple years after that, because those few years right there were like when it all came to a head, and I'm like, okay, I got to figure something else out. So
sucks.
Yeah.
At least you got the honeymoon.
I know. I mean, I have vague memories of it, but it was like not very pleasant. So anyway, so this last trip out there, I was able to like, kind of rewrite all my memories of Hawaii, because like, yeah, it was not good, but it was fun. It was cool, dude. Like Maui's beautiful. We went and toured like through the jungles and the beaches, and got to hang out. There was a documentary film crew there that was staying on Shelby's little, because it's like Shelby's house or mom's house, and like there was a documentary crew staying with everybody, and they were touring around. Shelby was taking all of us around like Lahaina and all the jungles and stuff. And then I got to hang out with Shelby's mom, Unjected Grandma, who is like literally, dude, you should have her on the show. Like, she's literally the most hilarious, like over the top, hilarious gal I've ever met in my life. She's freaking awesome, dude. Like, she needs to have, I keep telling her, like, you need to have your own show. You need to have your own, like, everything. Like, we have a list of t-shirt ideas that are like Unjected Grandma, like shirt ideas, and every single one of them is like pure gold, and there's like hundreds of them. It's freaking amazing. So anyway, shout out to Unjected Grandma.
We got to start writing shit down.
Yep. Dude, that's the number one thing. I have like so many notes in my note thing. It's like every time I come up with an idea, I'm like, okay, I got to write that down. I've got like skits, I've got like stand-up bits, like everything, dude. I just need to like amalgamate them together and like figure something out. But it's like I've got like a treasure trove of genius ideas here that I need to do something with. I do want to start making skits, like just a straight up like TikTok like skit thing, dude. Like I've got some freaking good ones, man. I don't know what it's gonna take. Maybe just me talking about it publicly here. I'm like, dude,
right? No, that doesn't. It takes
You heard
more
it
than
here
that. It
first.
takes
It takes more
actually
than
doing
that.
it, because
I
I've
know.
said out loud about the
Yeah.
3 books that I should be writing for the
Mhm.
last 5 fucking years. And
books are tough though, dude. Holy shit. I'll tell you what, with this book. So the main author, Stephanie Perucci, she's like publisher, Perucci Publishing. She's a very, very impressive gal too. I mean, you should have her on too, man. Like I'll get you in touch with her. Like she's a very, very impressive gal.
Hey,
Anyway.
look, so just a quick note for anybody who's saying you should have this person on. The email address, this is not for you, Scott, but
Yeah.
like the email address for the show is in there. And you guys know that like Shelly does a ton of the booking too. That's all you have to do is like throw a contact our way sometimes, you know, and that's what allows it to happen.
Cool. Yeah, no, I can definitely.
And
But
Scott,
yeah,
I mean, Scott's been awesome about sharing contacts, and we all kind of, you know, we try to do that as often as possible if we can to hook each
I
other
still need
up.
people to
Absolutely.
tag Bryce Mitchell. You know, want to get him on the show since he's down the road,
Bryce
here.
Mitchell.
Especially now with the new Slim. Someone said Slim Haiti.
Slim Haiti, that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Slim Haiti.
20-year-old Arkansas white boy rapper just got swooped up on for terrorism charges.
Oh
for-
yeah, I
for
was
his
listening. I was
lyrics.
listening to your show before. Yeah, that's crazy. I came in right at the end of that story. That's crazy.
Yeah,
But Steve, what I was gonna say is like Stephanie, dude. So she basically like we had the idea of writing this book, and like she literally like in a week like wrote the majority of this book. Like just sat down, just busted it out. I was like, here's the manuscript. I'm like, what the fuck? Because like in my mind too, I've wanted to write a book. I've got like a couple that I've wanted to write too, but like watching her process, and she just like literally just like I just sat down and just like 16 hours a day, just 6 days in a row, boom, busted out. I'm just like, what the hell? So it was very inspiring to see that process, to see going from an idea to like, okay, here's a rough draft manuscript, and then piecing it together and all the and then like being a part of the process of like editing, copy editing, and putting it all together. It's like, wow, it's a huge process. And there was like 5 or 6 people that were involved in all the different aspects of it. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it was a pretty huge undertaking, but then just watching her process of just busting it out, I'm just like, okay, well, there's no excuses now. There's no excuses, you know? So
go to get that book. Shop
But-
There's an echo, Chris.
yeah, what's that? I don't know if
What?
that's me
Is
or
it gone?
Oh, there it
when
goes. It's
you-
gone.
When you pulled up the
Okay, I know what's going on because I have it set up for the audio to come through my that when I share my screen. 'Cause I got all this shit open. So when I talk,
Scott, and I don't want to do too hard of a transition, but I can't get this fucking video out of my skull. Have you seen the clip we played a few times where it's war coverage, Israel Palestine war coverage set to Fox NFL Sunday music?
No, I haven't seen that. I saw some.
I got it. It's right.
I saw some news coverage of it sent.
I
sent to
labeled it.
some-
I moved it up, so it's
yeah.
always.
Did you
Yeah,
see the
well,
one? Did you see the one where it was like there was like news coverage where it's like, all right, the Palestinians are coming. It was like legitimate
Yeah,
like Fox
yeah.
news coverage, but it was like da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, that's what this is.
Starts right now.
Hey, this is going to be an unbelievable day of news, so don't miss a minute.
Israel against Gaza.
Point out the power players going against Israel. You got the West Bank, you got Gaza, but there's other players in this region. So let's break it down country by country. First off, look at this. Afghanistan, we know they're running for the hills because of the Taliban.
Iran, front and center.
Egypt is where they came up with the Muslim Brotherhood that gave birth to all these terror
Absolutely gave birth to all of it.
Let's back up and go over how we got here and who the players are. First, let's look down. Outline, this is the size of Israel, roughly the size of New Jersey. Missiles from Hezbollah coming back in, opening up a two-front war right there. So let's go to the wall. What about Hezbollah? They're known as the gold standard of terror groups. Hamas is Shia. I think Hezbollah, no, you're right. Hamas is Sunni, and then Hezbollah comes up as Shia. We have the muscle, we have the energy, we got the strategy. Okay, let's put in perspective. Let's take a walk over to the map about where we're at right now. And first off, get an idea of the region. Friendly, Egypt. Friendly, Jordan. Here is Syria, obviously an enemy. They all love to kidnap, they all love to kill, they all like to horrify people, and they like to intimidate. That's really what makes up terror.
That's what's so scary about our current
Pete, that was
situation.
really good, but you know what Chris is doing right now?
Doing this right here.
You know what that means?
I'm told that means 30 seconds left.
During the weekend. All right, Pete, great job.
Thank you, Brian.
I'll see you over the weekend.
Right, Fox and Friends.
Oh my God, yeah, I saw that.
I gotta fix that and put the Pfizer thing at the end of it.
That's so crazy.
I've got to put brought to you by Pfizer.
Yeah, totally. I thought you meant war coverage in like actual war footage to like.
No,
football
but
music,
it
yeah,
got
no, that's
me
great.
thinking, I wish I had better editing skills because the big screens behind them to be able to have the Gaza footage on there with the
There you
yellow
go.
lines going on it when they're moving their hands.
Yeah.
Would be
Yeah, it's,
fucked up.
it's so shocking. It's like it just, these people like revel in this stuff. They love it. It's just like almost at the same time where like all these local news outlets, like I'd argue, they love every time there's like a school shooting or something like that. They just love it. They're like, oh, salivating, like, please God, give me another school shooting. Like this is their favorite thing in the world. I've never seen, it's just so frustrating to see them so riled up like that, man. Like, what the hell?
Well, it's to push this terrorist narrative. God damn it. I can't believe I took our fucking terrorist ding counter video off. It fits so well with
so many different things. So
it
many
does. It's staying on from now on. It's staying on there once I get it back up there. But I don't know if you've seen this video, Scott, of the Daniel Hodges, one of the Capitol Police, testifying.
Nope, I haven't seen it.
Shit, we might start.
Well, this is setting the ground for a lot of what we've been talking about for the last several years, which is the blending of terror narratives, where now the domestic violent extremists that we all are, at least according to the Biden administration and the broad strokes definition of what domestic violent extremists are, it's 85-90% of the country. By the way that they've written it, it gets melded with the foreign terrorist, foreign terror narrative. So we've got all of the Hamas trained Venezuelans that have been smuggled over the southern border, which is a narrative right now. That are flooding all of this, major cities.
Hamas, right? Is that what it is that's coming?
Hamas.
Hamas.
MS-13.
They linked up with MS-13. So
yeah, MS-13.
Hamas 13.
Here's that clip real quick. I'll show you. It come from a 3-minute clip of his testimony. I shut it down to just the points that need to be made.
There was plenty of booing. A woman called us stormtroopers. Another woman who was part of the mob of terrorists laying siege to the capital of the United States started pulling the terrorists off my team from their backpacks. Terrorists were breaking apart. The terrorists were scaling the scaffolding. The terrorists perceived themselves by the terrorists as they ignored our hung in the air as the terrorists threw their own CS through our terrorists alternated between attempting as one another 20 terrorists move in to attack. Terrorists pushed through the line and engaged. The terrorist is knocked to the ground. At this point, the terrorists had claimed most of the western terrace, cornering myself and other officers on the southern edge to where the terrorists had forced our retreat. I did not know that the terrorists had gained entry into the building fence before the terrorists had true access to the building. The terrorists had a wall of shields that they had stolen. A mob of terrorists were coordinating their efforts now, capital, to drive off the terrorists.
Yeah, the feds are terrorists, so there you go.
This is true.
Yeah. Little accidental clarity. It's like the Israeli state Twitter account constantly referring to Hamas as ISIS. And it's why are you telling us that this is a Western-backed, intelligence-based, organization that's used to destabilize targets that Israel wants to get rid of? Because that's what ISIS has been doing for the last decade.
Well, George Bush, you've seen the clip where he says it out loud.
Problems, not specifically on this issue, just in general, let's put it this way: money trumps peace sometimes.
Yeah, money trumps peace.
That's why we gotta fund the terrorists. Make sure there's plenty of terror.
Your money trumps peace, baby.
Terror.
Give me that money.
Sometimes we gotta get the money.
The money's only good if it's soaked in blood. It's got a little bit of blood splatter on it, and then that's the money I love. Your money's no good if it doesn't have little pink splatterings on
it. Right. Preferably from some brown people, preferably on John McCain's personal list of brown people John McCain isn't pleased with. Which is Lindsey Graham's favorite money, for sure.
Oh, for sure. What is that guy? Sure. Is that guy up to any crazy stuff these days? I've heard him a few weeks ago saying some crazy stuff. Does he have any new good sound bites?
I don't know if he has anything new. I mean, we could probably find out. That guy's crazy.
Who do you guys think is the most deplorable, despicable warmonger out there right now?
Nikki Haley's got to be up there.
Okay.
She's got to be up there.
Yeah. What about trying to think?
I know Shapiro. Are we talking
Shapiro
just politicians or
just anybody?
public-
Yeah, I
public
mean
figures.
Probably yeah. Shapiro's pretty out there too for sure.
Pretty up there.
Jordan Peterson kind of exposed himself a little bit there.
Oh fuck! I wish I had the Jordan. Did you see that clip of Jordan Peterson I put up on Telegram?
I don't think so.
Of the yeah, it's a joke. I made funny with him.
This is from last.
I would have had it. Boom.
This is from last week. Lindsey Graham basically saying like there's no such thing as enough dead babies.
What the fuck?
Is there a threshold for you and
Oh.
But here's what you need to do: be smart.
is there a threshold for you, and do you think there should be one for the United States government at which the U.S. would say, let's hold off for a second in terms of civilian casualties? Is there a point at which you would start to question?
No, if somebody asked us after World War II, is there a limit what you would do to make sure that Japan and Germany don't conquer the world? Is there any limit what Israel should do to the people who are trying to slaughter the Jews? The answer is no. There is no limit. But here's what you need to do:
There is no limit. There is no limit to the amount of babies.
Lindsey Graham demands piles, stacks, veritable pyramids of them little dead Palestinian babies.
You said you're watching earlier. Did you see the IDF footage we were playing? The collateral damage 2.0.
Yeah. The green footage stuff. Yeah.
Now it's totally Hamas. They were throwing cell phones. I don't know if they're throwing the cell phones to get them to, or taping them to these poor Israeli dancers.
Y'all know what sounds fantastic? I mean, absolutely divine. A little bit of tiramisu and some dead Palestinians.
Ooh, that sounds delicious. God.
Ain't that scrumptious?
Scrumptious.
Y'all.
Dude. It's disgusting, man.
It is.
If I hadn't become so disappointed in Tim Dillon, I would love to be able to have him dress up like Meghan McCain. Just have a conversation. Lindsey Graham, Meghan McCain.
Dude, I know that's a tragic one right there. That's a tragic one because I used to be a hardcore Tim Dillon fan. Like I used to listen to all his stuff. I was on his Patreon, and then COVID happened. I'm like, oh no, he just completely shilled out, dude. And I'm like, I haven't listened to him in forever. And I try to listen to him every now and then. I'm just like,
I didn't know who the fuck he was until after COVID.
Well, you know who's a good replacement for Tim Dillon is our buddy Zach over at Unfit Statesman. He's my good. He's my Tim Dillon Suboxone.
Which by the way, and I said this yesterday, and I want to make this perfectly clear that I wasn't joking. Zach is really fat now. Zach is horrifically, grotesquely overweight.
Oh man, okay. I was gonna be surprised. He was telling us he's been hitting the gym really hard, so I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's what he's drawing lines on his freaking horrendous blubber.
Oh my
what
gosh.
He's doing. He's just that tubby. He's been shame eating.
Wow.
Every time he's not on camera, he's just shoveling ho-hos, ding-dongs, and things that aren't penises into his mouth, left and right. All at every opportunity he gets.
Damn, Zach, I'm gonna have a chat with him. Be like, Zach, what's going on, man?
Poor fella.
What's going on, bro? Damn. That's hilarious. Poor guy.
I'll tell you what, though, not necessarily, as a replacement, because they, I think it came up right around the same time, but somebody who should be getting as much, if not more, credit than Tim Dillon for just being a funny fucking fella. Shane Gillis.
Okay. There you
I've
go.
got a little clip here.
He
Dude,
gets away with everything because of his face, right?
because he's got
he's
Chisholm face
on the edge.
Can we
Dude,
really?
he
Can we
just
tell?
po-
No, he got
just
canceled
posted
from
a
Saturday Night
picture.
Live.
Did you see the picture he just posted of him and Kid Rock?
No,
I just think it's funny because Kid Rock's got this fucking rattleskin cane. It's a rattlesnake cane. It's a they shoved the cane down a rattlesnake's throat, and it's cane.
Okay.
It's Kid Rock's fucking cane for his shitty
That's pretty baller, dude.
plantar fasciitis on his foot.
That's pretty baller.
It is pretty baller. I mean, if he would have fucking caught the rattlesnake himself, but Kid Rock drinks Bud Light.
Interesting.
Now it's sad. Now with Biden, we get like one speech every 3 months. And it's hard. He's like falls and shit. It's hard to watch. It's sad. I'm rooting for the guy. Obviously, I want things to go well, but it's hard to watch him do anything. Anytime I watch Biden do anything, I get the same feeling as like, you ever go to a friend's house and they have like a 16-year-old dog and it walks in the room? And you got to do that whole like, oh, hey, there he is. Just look at him. He's looking great. My favorite thing about Biden is anytime Biden finishes a speech, he transforms into a Roomba. Okay. Now it's sad. Now with Biden, we get like one speech every 3.
That's pretty good. I like that.
So I saw the thing that made me crack up is that he really is kind of like a 16, 18, 20 some year old dog.
Yeah.
And everybody's just supposed to be like, oh, hey, oh, look, he's moving around today. Oh,
Yeah.
he must be feeling good.
Yeah, you set the bar pretty low, I guess. I think the bar's pretty low. People are like, oh my God, he can like say 2 sentences in a row. Oh my gosh, he's the best. It's crazy. I saw a good one fairly recently.
Him and Fetterman.
Oh God, and it
like just converse. I don't know. Have a round table at a little tiny. Remember those tiny tables they would have at Thanksgiving, your family Thanksgiving, the little tiny plastic, and they had the little plastic chairs, and they'd break and shit, and we'd all have to sit at them. What the fuck? Anyway.
Yeah,
and that's what they got to sit at.
Totally.
You know, like remember Trump sat at that little desk, and they made a big deal because he sat at this tiny desk, little tiny desk. Biden sits at the same desk. They need to take that desk, turn it sideways, and Fetterman and Biden on camera, they have a discussion about, I don't know, something. We have them try to figure something out amongst themselves in front of us and see how that goes.
That would be so hilarious.
You can distract them with like a couple of pairs of safe scissors and some construction paper.
Yeah, exactly. And some Elmer's glue. Start eating it. Yeah. I saw a good meme recently. It was not good. It's not in very good taste, but it made me laugh like literally out loud. But it was like, you remember when Biden went to Maui and he was like at that conference and he like fell asleep, right? And it was like a big controversy. He fell asleep in the thing. So there was like a photo of him like sleeping, and the caption was, "When you go to Maui, but find out all the kids are missing." I was like, oh shit. Oh damn. Yeah.
At this point in the game, the memes have to be, the jokes are just kind of across the board have to be a little bit darker.
Yeah.
Than Wesley Snipes in a windowless basement around 1 o'clock in the morning during a complete
power failure.
You know, yeah. Complete blackout of the moon. Yeah.
Yep. I agree. You know, I mean, we're as far as we are in all this because of the memes. I think that's the coolest thing about it is like they do all these like $1 trillion campaigns and like it's just one meme just takes it all apart. It's the most hilarious thing ever. Like, so I don't know. I feel like I've had this thought. There was a time in like 2020, 2021, like early 2021, where the memes were so good, like almost like over the top.
And will lead to
Sorry.
Where's that
It's okay.
coming
It's good.
from?
I'm trying to get this video ready, and trying to use Telegram right now to pull these videos instead of my phone.
There you go. That's the best trick in the book right there. Telegram's awesome. Sending clips from one place to another. That's like I do that all day long.
Yeah, and
but
Telegram you can download everything.
Yep. Ever if I'm trying to get something from my phone to my computer, it's like I just send it through this channel. I just made my own private channel of just like a media file thing.
Oh my god.
And I just
genius.
I just make my own little private channel. It's called Files Media Sharing. So if I need to search for it, I just type in whatever Files Media Sharing.
Fucking
send it from my
genius.
phone. Send it from my phone to my computer, and then I just boom, download it. Bam.
Listen, content creators.
There you go. That's how you do it. Just rapid fire, just sending media back and forth all day long.
Yeah,
but
I do it on my Google Drive.
Oh, that's a pain in the ass, dude.
It is a pain in the ass.
Telegram all day long. Just make your own little private channel. You're good. But the memes were so good for a period of time there. And then I noticed like significantly there was like it was like every day, multiple times a day. It was just like bam, 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 bam. And then all of a sudden, like there are good ones out there, but they're like they weren't to the same level and they weren't like as rapid fire. You know what I mean? I'm like, God, was there like some sort of like AI? Like, was this part of the agenda too? Were they making the memes? Like, what was going on here? Because it was such a concentrated, deliberate, just packing. I don't know if anybody else had that same experience. And then you just notice it just kind of fell off. It just kind of like got silent for a while and just kind of just dissipated.
Meme wars.
The quality and the consistency and just like of the memes that kind of fell off there. Like,
well,
2021.
They're throwing Douglas Mackey in jail, right? Is that his name, Doug?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
the Clinton guy,
meme king, he's out of the game right now. So obviously his influence was massive.
Yeah.
I mean, Scott, you're seeing it yourself with the lack of quality memes going around, and this coincides with, the indictment, arrest, and he's been sentenced yet? Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He didn't. He got a couple months or something, 7 months or something. Way better than 10 years, but still.
But way too much time for doing a campaign freaking gag that's been in existence since there have been mailers.
Suck a fucking dick. Those fucking terrorists that are throwing him in prison is ridiculous.
Yeah. So crazy.
It's crazy.
How dare they?
When you live under a terrorist regime.
Mm-hmm.
Stupid fucking asshole.
Yeah.
Stupid fucking ass.
We'll click it.
Dude, I love it. Love
it.
Yeah.
When you talk about Biden and the Fetterman thing and Biden and the meme shit, last night, I didn't know like the presidential or the Republican debate was going on, and I didn't know that Trump had a way bigger fucking stream going on. He beats the Republican streams. I think you can take all the Republican streams, put them together, and Trump's one stream fucking Rumble doesn't talk about that. It was weird. But that's something to think about. They don't mention that Trump is crushing fucking numbers. But here's what I found crazy. Okay. Now I have these fucking dramatic music tracks that I have, and sometimes I'll take that track and I'll just talk over it about what's going on, right? And to get it in one shot, right? In a one shot thing because I'm not reading anything. It's just off the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's tough, right? Trump, at his fucking rallies, they're playing the dramatic music behind him as he speaks. And he doesn't miss a beat. He doesn't fumble. He doesn't trip on his words. It's fucking, I don't know if it's like genius or crazy or what in the I'm sure the music has some MK fucking shit going on.
For the country's destruction. We are a nation whose leaders are demanding all electric cars, despite the fact that they can't go far, cost too much and whose batteries and
It's kind of hard to hear that
all of
music,
the
ain't it?
other elements of
It's got a
those
weird echo.
horrible cars
I'm wondering if that
produced
music is
in
actually
China.
there.
Materials only
There's, like,
available in China.
It's there.
When an unlimited amount of gasoline
You
is
pause that.
available inexpensively right here in the United States.
Okay, it was echoing a hell of a lot for the first like.
Yeah, I didn't get a click. I didn't get a click my mute. Let me try it one more time because it's only like 30.
Okay.
Yet everyone knows that the Green New Deal is fake and will lead to our country's destruction. We are a nation whose leaders are demanding all electric cars, despite the fact that they can't go far, cost too much, and whose batteries and all of the other elements of those horrible cars are produced in China with materials only available in China. When an unlimited amount of gasoline is available inexpensively right here in the United States.
Even when he is, they come from China. It's still nice and dramatic, and the cars,
You know what's wild?
they come from China.
Wild. He's surpassed Orange Man, and he's like straight up like Brown Man, dude. Like,
He's
you see him there? He's like,
Yeah,
he's
the blonde. He's got
man.
blonde hair.
Brown Man bad.
Looks like
They introduce him as El Jefe now. That's just
Yeah, I mean, literally.
he's still walking out to Lee Greenwood, but now he's got a cape.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna have a full like luchador mask by the end of the 2024 campaign.
Mm-hmm. He's doing progressive party. What if he like identified as transracial for the election? There you go. Like I'm a black guy now, guys. I'm sorry.
He should someone who's more or less transracial. He should just get
Shaved his
Candace
head.
Owens to run with him as a VP.
There you go.
Like
There you
Trump
go.
Shaved his head,
Candace.
and grows that goatee. You've seen those pictures of him where they've taken and shaved his head and put the goatee. He does that, then he identifies as a black man.
Yeah, with the cornrows. Or no, that's Joe Biden. I see the one with Joe Biden with
Yeah,
the cornrows. Like that's
Corn pop
hilarious.
bros.
Well, Joe Biden knows who and who ain't black. So
Exactly.
Let's
I
go
heard
back into that. I mean, Joe's going to be telling people, if you don't vote for me, you're even less blacker than you were before.
that's funny. Owen Benjamin had a good joke on that recently. He goes, I actually love Joe Biden. He is my favorite president we've ever had because he's so racist. It's so refreshing. I was like, yeah,
so nice.
He really is wildly
Yes.
racist. It's pretty nuts. The amount of just racist ass shit that Joe
They
Biden
all-
has said
Mhm.
over the years is
Racist.
up to, I mean, recently, dude, they put this guy on stage at an
It's
all black
because-
college graduation, and you think he's not gonna say some wildly out of pocket shit?
Yeah,
I
because
didn't
we're
know
in
they let
this,
you guys read now. Like, the
woke,
fuck?
woke shit, and then they're writing these fucking things, but what they're getting him to say is racist because everything that they're saying fucking sounds racist as fuck. Like what we showed yesterday about when they're on CNN or MSNBC, whatever it was, when they're talking about Trump's leading the blacks, and this black lady's talking, referring to him as they and the blacks, and like she's separated from those lesser than that. They don't understand, because Trump will just repeat things, so then they
She's
believe
basically
it.
saying, look, man, these ratchet ass hoes can barely put their booty hole on
We're gonna be back to
Snapchat.
they don't know
How
what
you
the internet is. They don't know how to
right.
get a license, or we gotta. They don't know what identification is, or how to
Look, if
get
we're
it,
not counting purchase of Sunny Delight on food stamps as a vote for Joe Biden, then we're just not going to be able to find a way for these people to vote this year because they're just that incompetent.
Yeah, dude. It's so crazy. Did you guys see the clip? I think I saw it on, I don't know where it was yesterday. It was like the poll guy. Okay, so it was like this. It was like one of the election places, and like the liberal guy was like running up to the conservative guy and was like giving him a hard time. Did you see that? Did you guys cover that already? Did you guys show that? on the show?
No.
Okay.
Apparently
Pretty
he
funny.
is some dude who fucking was hassling. They busted him out. He was at some Trump rally or some shit. I don't even know how to look for that though.
I don't even know either. I'm trying to think. But anyway, it was pretty funny for your viewers. I can see if I can find it here too. But it was pretty wild. Like, it's just, well, I mean, it's exactly what you would expect. Like,
Yeah, I mean, like very visceral, very
Yeah.
aggressive, very like, but they're holier than thou, and they're about
Yeah.
unity and peace as they're screaming at a dude who's just like, "Hey, you wanna?"
Yeah.
What are they called? Like, they hand out like a mock ballot thing.
Yeah.
So you know what it looks like before you go in or whatever, and what to expect with it. I'm assuming is what it is. I don't
Yep.
vote, so I don't fucking know. But yeah, that it's fucked up. 'Cause that's,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the whole election thing. I mean, they're gonna let that cycle run enough to fucking get heated and shit. You know, I bet we'll get into spring, the you know, the Israeli spring, I guess it would be this.
Yeah.
And
It's the
then,
Israeli spring. There you go.
you know, and then you have you know, just what's going on the streets here boiling up. I mean, it's set up to, yeah, there's not going to be election.
It'll be the 15-year anniversary of the Arab Spring.
There you
The
go.
Arab Spring, yep. There you go, man. I mean, yeah, I mean,
I found that video. I put it in the private chat there if you wanted. It's
See that.
slightly entertaining. If Steve, have you seen it? You know what I'm talking about? You know what this is?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's just good to get on the record. Liberal Karen goes crazy.
Okay.
Might as well have been walking up to my head on the way to the polling station, putting a gun to my head, trying to tell me not to vote. You expect me to not take that fucking personally? You fucking try to overthrow elections with violence, and then you're out here among decent people.
Thanks for
What do you
coming
have
out
to say
there.
that, huh? And what's on your fucking what are your policy prescriptions?
Have a nice day. You've already
Fucking
voted. It's
rapist
good.
rights.
Yeah.
Involving yourself in people's fucking families and their fucking bedrooms.
It's pretty wild.
You fucking animal. You try to steal my vote next year, I'm gonna fucking remember you personally.
Thank you.
In fact, I'm taking a fucking picture of you. Is that all right?
Yeah, you
Permission?
can. Yeah. It's a one-party consent
Shitbird?
state.
Shitbird? Yeah, one-party state. You want a fucking one-party country is what you want.
Hey, sir, how are you? Headed in to vote? Could I get a Republican sample ballot?
has no idea what
Sure,
he meant
thank
by
you.
that. The one party thing.
Try not to do anybody with these people because they put on the face of a good neighbor, but they support lynch mobs or the fucking KKK or they're fucking Bible-beating bigots and freaks. And they're not good neighbors.
They're not good neighbors, guys.
He's not done, is he?
I think that
Oh,
was
yeah,
it. Yeah.
I was gonna say I thought he would come back. Like that is what the mainstream media has created.
Here we have a clip from Craig Pasta with guests Fiorella Isabel, Sam Tripoli, and Jimmy Dore.
It has been tainted, and I think that we have to work through in a different way in terms of getting the American government in the hands of the people, in terms of not working for the American people, and also working on behalf of the rest of the world by not getting us into World War III, which we're pretty much close to World War III, either via Israel-Palestine, China via Taiwan, or Russia, Ukraine. We could go into World War III from any of these scenarios, and it seems like it's going to get worse before it gets better, meaning that no matter if it's a Democrat or a Republican, someone wants to go to war with somebody, no matter who is president, because the deep state, the national security state, military industrial apparatus as a whole does not change. Presidents change, but that apparatus has not changed for a long time. So I think the first thing to do, Pasta, to answer your question, would be to get the United States to stop its interventionist wars, get the United States government to change. And I'm not a reformist, right? So I think we're past the point where electoral politics can get us there. And I think this, not just from Kennedy, but from before, our election system is completely fraudulent. We don't have fair elections. We can't vote ourselves out of this.
Yeah.
So I do think that we are going to have to take action in some sort of form. And, the left might call this the revolution or whatever, but I call it I don't know what to call it. It just literally, we, the American people, need to take action to regain our government. And apparently we have to be careful of how we say this because, with the surveillance state expanding after January 6th, and even before that, after 9/11, you could get literally incarcerated for saying the wrong thing. And now we're seeing that, of course, with Palestinian protesters. They can't say certain things too. So now it's getting our right to free speech is getting smaller and smaller. And that is by design. That, any conflict is exploited by the State Department and the surveillance state to expand on our rights. So we can't rebel against whatever, this is. And I don't think the United States is what we have been sold it is. It is not this, dream where we have all this freedom and democracy. We do have some things that other countries don't have. And the more I've traveled, I've seen, there isn't all bad, but it's also becoming, our rights and our freedom are getting smaller and smaller to the point where I think the American public, this is why we have a large independent libertarian population in an individualist society, because in the United States, the government has lied to the people for so long that a lot of people just don't want the government involved. So they have this perspective that the government, is just bad. But in other parts of the world, people do like their government. And if they like their government, they should be allowed to choose. We shouldn't have Anthony Blinken going there and trying to instigate a coup. And so I think that will solve our problems majorly, at least to begin with.
I totally agree with everything you're saying right there. I think I've been saying this a lot, and some people may think it's a little crazy, but in a weird way, America is like North Korea. We're just on the opposite end of the spectrum. And I'll say this, and just hear me out before you, is that the North Korean people are beaten down so badly, and they're forced propaganda that they're the greatest nation ever. They have to accept it, or they starve to death. Well, we're kind of on that line, but we're the opposite of that. Americans are drowning in comfort. There's so much comfort, and they're constantly, whether it's your phone, drugs, alcohol, pornography, all these things that just make you feel so comfortable. And then while that's happening, you're being inundated. America's the greatest. It's the most freedom. It's all that stuff, to the point where we're comfortably numb, and we're not paying attention to what's happening with our government. And what is happening with our government is that our centralized bank is funding the entire international military industrial complex, and they're using our sons and daughters as stormtroopers. War now is something you see on your television, on your phone, on YouTube. It's not real. It's a TV show. It's Game of Thrones. And we don't care because we don't have to participate, because they give us just enough so we don't have to really pay attention. And that's how I think, like, North Korea is like the opposite, on the same level, but the opposite of the spectrum, where they are bombarded and broken down into submission. We're just comfortably numb, and we don't pay attention, and we don't even know how our government works. They want that on purpose. And that's where we are. Nobody's paying attention to what's really going on. And some people are. And some people are waking up. Like, there's a bunch of people on the right that are not happy with the far right and their just belief that Israel above all. I mean, people are not happy with this. And, when I see people like Candace Owens, who goes to campus and gets berated, I'm like, she has a right to speak her mind. Well, I say that for the same people who want to stick up for Palestine. It's not like picking and choosing depending on what jersey you're wearing. Are you wearing an R jersey or an L jersey? Are you wearing a C jersey for capitalism or an S jersey for socialism? That's not freedom of speech. To me, is across all things. You have to defend even the most hated speech. You have to defend it. So that's my opinion. They have made us so comfortably numb. We do not pay attention to how we're being used and abused.
Jimmy Dore just joined the show, ladies and gentlemen. In a little bit, we're going to go over to my Rumble channel, my new Rumble channel, Pasta to Go. I will put the links inside the chat. But Jimmy, you heard a little bit of that right there, what Sam talked about. Freedom of speech, team sports. Why don't you just jump in and give us your opinion? You've had a lot to say about this particular topic. Go right ahead.
By the way, Jimmy coordinating with his house. Look at that, dude. Your outfit is coordinated with your house. That's an outfit right there. I like it.
Well, my handler from the CIA set this up, but I think freedom of speech is important, but only for speech that I like. If it's something that's going to make me uncomfortable, I think you should be sanctioned, and then you should be threatened with the loss of your job. And I'm like Ben Shapiro in that. Turns out the facts do care about your feelings, and your feelings matter. I mean, it was amazing to see all those guys who I had respect for because I thought they were real. I thought they had principles. I thought guys like Ben Shapiro were real about their devotion to freedom of speech. And for more than a decade now, I would say almost 2 decades, they've been screaming at the top of their lungs about the left trying to censor people speaking on college campuses and canceling people. And they're against cancel culture, and they're against all that. And it turns out they weren't. They were only against it because it was affecting them. And Jon Stewart once said, and I'm not a fan of Jon Stewart's anymore, but he said something really smart once. He said, that's what principles are there, and values are there for when it's hard, not for when it's easy. And if you don't stand by your values when it's hard, they're not values, they're just hobbies. And so that's what free speech had turned out to be for most of the right wingers, like Megyn Kelly, people like Ben Shapiro. I keep going back to that. And my friend Dave Rubin, right? I always thought that he was committed to that. I always thought those guys were always committed to freedom of speech. I am. I'm an absolutist. I'm a free speech absolutist. That's why I was so excited about RFK Jr.'s candidacy at first, was because he said, if you don't have, he said he was against censorship. And he said, if you don't have free speech, you can't have a democracy. And he's exactly right. Well, now he's come out for censorship. He's for censoring the Palestinian protesters on college campuses. And, he's totally flipped. He's anti-war when it comes to Ukraine. He's pro-war when it comes to Israel, Palestine. And now he's gone even further, and he's pro-war. He's saber-rattling with Russia, China, Iran, and Venezuela. He put them all together, and Saudi Arabia. He forgets that they're our ally, and they're the basis of the petrodollar. And if that goes away, the whole country goes away. And so he sounded just like John Bolton or Dick Cheney or George Bush. We just showed it on our show yesterday, and he's saying that we have to keep. He said that he literally said that having Israel in the Middle East is like having an aircraft carrier in the Middle East. Unfortunately, that aircraft carrier has a concentration camp on it. And he said that and if we let them get control of the oil, that Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Venezuela, he grouped them all together, and he called Maduro the Maduro regime, which is right out of John Bolton's lexicon. And he said, if we let this happen, they're going to control 90% of the oil. Yeah, well, that's what our whole foreign policy has been ever since the Second World War. That's why we're in perpetual wars. And I thought that RFK Jr. was the guy who was going to stand up to that. He stood up to it in Ukraine, and he was telling the truth about it. And now he just flips 100%. And now he sounds like all the people that we've ever had in power, talking about we have to go to war, and we have to saber rattle, and we have to keep our military going because of oil. He literally is saying this now. It was stunning and shocking for me to hear him say that. It's like when they asked Trump, why are you keeping troops in Syria? And he said, for the oil. Well, when Trump said it, it was refreshing because that was the truth. And that's why they want to get rid of Trump, because he accidentally tells truths like that when he's not supposed to. He's supposed to say we're keeping troops in there to fight terrorism and for freedom and liberty. The terrorists that we fund and invent, just like Israel funds Hamas. People don't know that. Yeah. They don't tell them that on the news that ever since 2000 or even earlier that Israel has literally been funding. In fact, Benjamin Netanyahu said in 2019, if you care about the the state of Israel, you'll be for funding Hamas. And why do you want to do that? Well, there's two purposes for that, because it splits the Palestinians in half, and they don't want the Palestinian Liberation Organization to control Gaza like they do the West Bank, because they're rational, they're they're secular, and they're not terrorists. But they want Hamas, they want to prop them up so they can use their terrorism and whenever they decide to fight back against Israel, they can use that as a pretext to go in and do exactly what they're doing right now, mow people down so they can take over their land. That's been the plan all the time. We joke on my show that Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty over at Breaking Points, they sit there and go, I wonder what the end game is for Israel. It's hilarious. What the fuck do you think the end game is? The end game is they want to wipe those people out, get them to go to Egypt, get them to go to Syria, get them to go to Lebanon, get them to go anywhere else so they can take over that land. That's been the plan all along. It started with the Nakba, and it's continuing it right now with their genocide. And it's wild to me to see people justify this. They go, well, Jimmy, war is always hell. War is ugly. I've had people say this to me. They go, war is always hell. War is ugly. Look what we did in Dresden. Look what we did with the fire bombings of Japan. Look what we did in Hiroshima. And look what we did in Nagasaki. And I said, yeah, that's why I thought RFK Jr. was going to stand up against that stuff, because we didn't need to do any of that shit.
Yeah.
But we already won those wars, and we did that shit anyway. We didn't need to do that stuff. And so, but they're using that to justify, and they go, well, RFK can't become president if he's even neutral on Israel. And I'm like, well, that's why I thought he was going to be exciting, because he was going to stand up against that. A leader creates space for you to be that way. Like he created space to tell the truth about big pharma and COVID and vaccines. He created that space himself, and he took all the slings and arrows and character assassination it takes to do that. That's a real leader. He created space around Ukraine. He created space for people to tell what's really going on. This is a proxy war with Russia. We blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, the whole thing. And now they're saying, well, he can't do that with Israel. Of course he can. That's what a leader does. A leader creates that space. And it turns out what we're going to need right now in this country, and if we don't have it, nothing will change, and everything will just keep going to shit. We're going to need a real revolution. I think we're going to need people to really get in the streets, because they had that big anti-war demonstration against the Israel-Palestine war just last Saturday in Washington, D.C., and that just knew nothing. Just like for the Iraq war, we had millions of people, not only in the United States in the streets calling out the Iraq war, but around the world were calling out the Iraq war. And they got their fucking war anyway, because just like Dick Cheney said in that one interview with Leslie Stahl, and she says, 3/4 of the Americans are against the Iraq war. And what did he say? He said, so. That's what he said. So, because they don't care about the people. In fact, they want the people. They want us fighting each other. They want a civil war. They want you to think half the country is white supremacist, even though more than half the country elected a black guy president twice. They want you to think that, because chaos favors the establishment. Because if you are afraid for your safety that now there's going to be terrorist attacks and half the country is a white supremacist and they want to kill gay people, then you would be gladly give up your civil liberties, which is exactly what they did after 9/11, which is why they got the Patriot Act. And now we live in a surveillance state. And then they had Pretty Boy Court. People even knew that. Now they lock you up. It's called indefinite detention. And, the habeas corpus was in the Magna Carta. So they got rid of that. So now we're operating on a liberty view from somewhere around the 1100s. And the only thing that can stop this is what they did in Canada with the truckers. When you stop capitalism, when you hit them with their profits. And that's why they had to call those people white supremacists and Nazis and violent, even though they were the opposite of all that. People need to remember that the truckers were vaccinated at a higher rate than the general population in Canada. They weren't protesting medicine. They were protesting bullshit authoritarianism, and they were right. And America, we're so propagandized, we can't tell the difference between a Nazi and a freedom fighter. We look at the freedom fighting truckers and we call them Nazis, and we look at actual Nazis in Ukraine and we call them freedom fighters. And so that's the only thing that can get us out of this is an actual revolution. And somehow we're going to need truckers and union workers and to shut down capitalism and to get money out of politics and to somehow take back our government.
Next we have a clip from Johnny Vedmore digging deep on the history of Palestine.
Now understand, since the destruction of the Kingdom of Judea, there has not been a single independent state called Palestine set up anytime in here.
the Zionists saw themselves as coming home to the ancestral land of the Jewish people. And that is the drive and the passion behind Israel. The Arabs had been in occupation of this same land since the Middle Ages, and they saw no reason why their land should go from them. So that the difficulty in accommodating to the existence of the State of Israel is inherent. We're dealing with something that is of its nature, has deep roots, and is rather intractable. Hello, my name is Johnny Vedmore, and today we're going to check if there's been a conspiracy by the Palestinian people to pretend that they had an identity and a cohesive group that was coherent and notable before 1948. Yes, it's been claimed by Ben Shapiro, the Rand Institute, and others, as we will hear, that the Palestinian people were not really a people before 1948, and they did not own the land properly. This is one of the excuses that comes up over and over again for why Israel should be able to occupy the land. Let's go and investigate. This is News Theory. So don't let anybody tell you that the media has never been in control of anything, because as you see in the center of this map, the media were in control back then of a place called Media, and that was in 600 BC. That's what we're looking at here, a map of 600 BC. This is after the Jews have been forced out, the majority of them, just 100 years before, I believe. And as you see, there's Arabia, there's Syria, and Jerusalem's part of Syria, and Gaza. So all of that area is part of Syria. And there's Egypt. Now, all of these will eventually be combined one day under the Ottoman Empire. One day, 1,000 years later, it would be combined, just under 1,000 years later, it'd be combined under the Ottoman Empire. And this would all change because this is ever changing. So we've got to go back and say that, okay, for just before this period of 600 BC, Israel existed. Israel existed back then for a short amount of time, and before that it had been Egypt, and afterwards it'd be the Ottoman Empire, and then it would be what I will argue is distinctly Palestinian and known as Palestinian around the world. As always, to find out more about what used to be, I went to the newspaper archives, and I went back to 1725. I thought that was far enough to go. In this case, it's the 5th of June, 1725, and I found Palestine here. And here we are in the book itself. This is the book that was advertised in 1725. It's called A New Journey Through the Kingdoms and Provinces of Italy, Greece, Egypt, and Palestine, as also through Switzerland, Alsacia, and Netherlands, written by a French officer who traveled those countries in the years 1721, 1722, and 1723 in, what was that, 25 familiar letters to a friend. Although it's hard to see, we are in the North American. It's the 29th of June, 1799. And what we got in amongst this is a telegram from London. There's a lot of going on. War is happening. It's the Napoleonic War. It's the Napoleonic era. And it says, in the midst of so many disasters, we make no doubt that the Directory finds great consolation in the more or less exaggerated accounts of the progress of Bonaparte in Palestine and Syria, which will be seen in another part of this paper. And it's talking about how Bonaparte is trying to get some sort of help in Palestine and Syria.
Were assimilated into Israelite culture.
The Palestinian people are incredibly diverse. For example, when you go to the northern regions, people typically have higher levels of ancient Anatolian DNA. And when you go to the south towards Egypt, people typically have higher levels of ancient Natufian-related ancestry. What's interesting about the Palestinian genome is that they are a combination of the 3 Stone Age populations that shaped the Levant. We are going to look at the Palestinian genome through a variety of different time periods to understand who these people are from a genetic perspective. Over here, I've got a Stone Age DNA breakdown of the average Palestinian genome. And interestingly, what we see is that 33% of their DNA is Natufian related. The Natufians were a proto-agriculturalist culture from the Levant who lived between 15,000 to 11,500 years ago. Today, this genomic component is found highest in populations found in Yemen. But if you look closely at this breakdown over here, what you see is that around 35% of the average Palestinian genome is Anatolian Neolithic farmer derived. The Anatolian Neolithic farmers lived just north of the Natufians. Around 9,000 years ago, they begin to migrate into both Europe and the Levant, and by entering into the latter, they mix with the Natufians, forming a new genomic component known as Levant Neolithic farmer. Levant Neolithic farmer DNA makes up around 50 to 60% of the Palestinian genome, and it is a characteristic genetic signal found in West Asia as well as parts of Europe. The Stone Age in the Levant ended approximately 7,000 years ago, and was soon followed by the Copper Age. The Copper Age was characterized by mass movements of Copper Age Iranian people known as the Iranian Chalcolithics. Before they migrated, the people in the Levant were almost as genetically divergent to the Iranian people as East Asians are to Europeans today. But over the course of thousands of years, there were waves of diverse populations that migrated into the Levant, bringing a distinct Iranian Chalcolithic component into the region, and setting the foundation for groups such as the Canaanites. The Canaanites were a distinctive northwestern Semitic-speaking culture that lived in the heart of the Bronze Age world. They were expert seafarers who, 3,500 years ago, colonized territories throughout the Mediterranean, reaching as far as the Iberian Peninsula. Using techniques similar to what I offer in my deep ancestry analysis, I have performed a Bronze Age statistical DNA comparison of the Palestinian genome against all the Bronze Age DNA samples available in the G25 database. The Palestinians derive a significant portion of their ancestry, between 50 to 80%, from groups genetically similar to the Bronze Age Canaanites.
Are you descendants of the Canaanites?
هل أنتم منحدرين من الكنعانيين؟ هل أسلافكم كنعانيين؟
صحيح.
Correct.
Okay, how does he know this? Where did he
كيف
learn
تعرف
this?
إنك أنت منحدر من الكنعانيين؟
يعني من أجدادنا بنعرف.
We know this from our grandfathers and.
Does he think that the Israelis are also
هل
descendants?
برأيك الإسرائيليين برضو منحدرين من الكنعانيين؟
والله ما بعرف الإسرائيليين هذول ما.
I don't know. He lifts
والله
his
ما
hand and says I don't know.
هل بتآمن إنه الفلسطينيين هم أصحاب الأرض الأصليين؟ Yes, I do believe this. Because of the Canaanites, we are their descendants.
The Palestinians are the descendants of the Canaanites.
Yeah.
So are the Jews.
هم اليهود كمان أصلهم كنعانيين. That's true, but originally it's for the Palestinians before it was for the Jews.
Are you descendants of the Canaanites?
هل أسلافك كانوا كنعانيين؟
أكيد.
For sure.
Okay. Do you think the Israelis are as well?
هل برأيك برضو الإسرائيليين أجدادهم كانوا إسرائيليين؟ أجدادهم كانوا كنعانيين سوري. هل برأيك إنه الإسرائيليين أجدادهم أو أسلافهم كانوا كنعانيين؟
إحنا ما بنعرف في شيء اسمه إسرائيل.
We don't recognize anything called Israel.
Okay, maybe the Jews, let's say.
طب اليهود هل برأيك كانوا أجدادهم أو أسلافهم كنعانيين؟
كمان لا احنا بنعتبر انهم هم كانوا برا واجوا هون واخذوا ارض ما يعني ظلم يعني هيك بنعتقد.
Also no, we believe that they came from outside and they took our land unjustly.
Are you, as a Palestinian, a descendant of the Canaanites?
هل أنت كفلسطيني أجدادك كانوا كنعانيين؟
أجدادي؟
Are your like great grandfathers Canaanites?
Yes. No.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. How do you know that?
كيف تعرف هذا الشيء؟
من جدودنا اللي قبلنا.
From our grandfathers from before.
They said that they were Canaanites?
هل هم حكوا هذا الشيء إنهم أصولهم كنعانية؟
صحيح.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Are the Israelis also?
هل الإسرائيليين برضو أصولهم كنعانية؟
Now look at what this does for modern Jews. Modern Jews
in this study's got about half their DNA from ancient Canaanites. All right, this shows us that we have an ancient connection to the land. Some people aren't going to like that it's half Canaanite. Okay, they were like, there's no way it's Canaanite. We're not Canaanites. But let's face it, Jews were a mixed multitude that left Egypt. They came to the land of Canaan. And how many times do we read about proselytes, about respecting proselytes, about treating proselytes properly in the Bible? It's telling us there probably were a lot of proselytes around. That's why they talked about them so much. I should also mention a third possibility, and that is, it is possible there are people from Canaan that have only been found in Canaan, and therefore they're labeled Canaanite. Perhaps they, in their own times, would have been labeled something else. What I really want to get to, though, what the whole point of this is not whether you're bothered by Canaanite or not. It's that Jews, for the most part, left this land nearly 2,000 years ago. They come back, 1,800 years after they left, and they still have half their DNA from this land. Half their DNA is tied to this land, and it's equal to the people that never left. All right, that's big. It's equal to the people who never left, even though the Jews have been gone for nearly 2,000 years. All right, now I want to look at how this affects modern Palestinians, modern Palestinian Arabs. I'm going to get into that in just a minute. So Palestinians get about half their DNA from ancient Canaanites as well. The other half were likely impacted by the Muslim conquest, which is probably the most obvious. That moved a lot of people and changed a lot of marriages. And then where did these other halves come from? As I mentioned before, Arabia, other places in the Near East, and East Africa. I don't think that should bother anyone. It makes logical sense. What's important to note here is there's no distinguishable South Europe DNA. South Europe is Greece. There's no Greek DNA in these people. Even if they were descended from the Philistines, I'm not saying they are, I'm just saying that the Philistines, their DNA was gone after 200 years. So you're talking, another 2,700, 2,800 years down the road. That DNA is certainly not going to be in anyone today. So there's no Philistine DNA. It's not in modern Palestinians, and it wasn't even the modern Philistines once their kingdom was gone.
So thank you for coming on that long and complex voyage with me. I really enjoyed the fact that it wasn't what I expected. I wanted to find out who the Palestinian people were, and I was expecting different answers. But the answers that I found were scientific. They were genetic testing. They were genomes. They were the understanding that the Palestinian people, 50 to 80% related to the Canaanite people. The Canaanite people from exactly where the Palestinians are, and the Palestinian people predate Israelites to an extent, or the state of Israel and any Israeli state before and Jewish state before. However, scientifically, we also know that genetically, the Jewish people, the people of Israel, are also 50% made up of 50% genetics from Canaanite origins, meaning the Palestinians and the Jews are basically cousins from distant relatives, occupying roughly the same land. What is extremely interesting is that the Jews were given an order by God to destroy the Canaanites. And if you listen to some of the people out there, some historians, they see the Bible as a history book. They see it as a textbook, as accurate. So when God said to the Israelites, kill the Canaanites, destroy them, exterminate them, and the book says that's what they did, then these scholars, these people who have got sense anywhere else, say that is exactly what happens, and the Canaanites don't exist anymore because God told them to, and they did exactly what God said. But that's not what happens. They go into a land, they kill the ruling class, and then they leave again. That's the reality. And if you look at the actual evidence on the ground, it shows that the Jews were very slow in the destruction of anything that was Canaanite, and there were elements of Canaanite culture everywhere. The idea that the Jews could just assimilate them in the Kingdom of Judea or the Kingdom of Israel. It just is poppycock, fairy tale. Armies come and go. They come and they go again. They don't go and they take every single person who live in the land and take them elsewhere. That's not how war or armies work, especially not back in the day. They come in, they conquest, sack a city maybe, they take a load of stuff, and then they go back home to their own homeland. They take that stuff away. They take their slaves away. But the people who stay in the homeland are still of that place. Their ancestors were of that place, and they stay within that place. And it doesn't matter. Yes, there's great migrations, and the Jewish story is very rare in history. They try and act like it's not, but there's only a few times where you had great migrations like that. But mostly in the farms and the villages around cities that get sacked, the genetics stay the same. The people stay the same for thousands and thousands of years because we got trapped in. Next door was a new tribe, and next door was another tribe. We can't move that far. There's not many options. So, what have we learned? Well, we've learned that the Palestinian people are in their homeland and they're being attacked. Now, they occupy, in Gaza at least, they occupy where the Philistines once occupied. And is a part of the Kingdom of Israel or a part of the Kingdom of Judea back in the day either. This would be a new conquest, wouldn't it? This is a really complicated thing. And so you've got to get all sides, all angles. You've got to listen to it all. But when you have a load of people try and convince you that the Palestinian people don't exist, that they don't matter, that history, they've got no history, that they don't give them the right to exist in the first place, that is really serious stuff. And that's where we are. The denial that they ever existed. Not they're denying their right to exist now, because that would show the face, the true face, wouldn't it? No, they deny their right to exist in the past. That's a much more esoteric idea. The Palestinian people never existed. The state of Palestine never existed. A nation never existed. But those people who live there now are ancestors of the people who used to live there and used to live there and so on and so forth. All the way down their family lines. Thank you for watching this program. Remember to like, share, and subscribe and all of that nonsense. Please, if you can, come to my websites, come to newspace.com or johnnyvedmore.com. You can join me on Patreon where you get early access and access to me directly. So please come support this work, support independent journalism. I also have some shows. I have Newspace Podcast, Newshound, Newspasty, of course, News Theory, and Audit Everything that you can find on newspace.com. Come, get involved, have some fun. Learn some stuff. You can also read my work, some of my articles on sites like newspace.com, UK Column, Unlimited Hangout, and I write long-form articles that are about history, the history that you're not allowed to know. Well, come learn it. I'm Johnny Vedmore. Thank you for joining me.
That's very close to That's man, standing like right in the line of gorilla. There's a moment there where he's thinking, then this is how I die.
Young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets.
Last but not least, we have a clip from Derrick Broze on fighting back on your privacy. Thanks again for tuning in. Hope to see you all next week.
Resistance Network. And today we are going to continue our 5 Ways series that I started last week with an article titled 5 Ways Your Health is Under Attack and What to Do About It. And we're going to continue that today with a look at your privacy, 5 ways your privacy is under attack and how to protect yourself. So stay tuned for that. That's what we're going to be covering. First off, I want to remind you guys to bookmark my website, theconsciousresistance.com. This beautiful website put together by Neil Rademacher, our webmaster. We've been posting content here for a decade. I've got documentaries, I've got books, I've got podcasts, hundreds of podcast interviews at this point on all kinds of topics. You can scroll down here and see documentaries, investigations, books, learn more about agorism. You can see my presentations, see my past research on the pyramid of power, surveillance, anarchism, the occult, weather modification, walk-in talks, Utah ritual abuse, 5G, the Finder's Cult, COVID-19. I've got some motivational talks. There's so much content here, guys, and I've been putting it together for over a decade plus. I think it's one of the best collections of quality research out there, so I encourage you to dive in. Now, I want to remind you again, since I write for The Last American Vagabond, thelastamericanvagabond.com, you can go here to my author page and you can always see the latest articles I have. As I mentioned, we covered this one just last week, 5 Ways Your Health is Under Attack, and today we're going to focus on this article, 5 ways your privacy is under attack and how to protect it. And to do that, first off, let's go ahead and watch this short clip. I'm going to play you guys this clip of former FBI advisor. His name is Tim Clemente, and this is taking place in 2013, as I outline here in my article. This interview with Tim Clemente, he's a former FBI counterterrorism agent. It happened just over a decade ago on CNN, May 2nd, 2013. And this was all going on during the Boston bombing situation. And so they were talking about how they're going to get communications between the alleged bombers. And Clemente made some statements on CNN, particularly on the Aaron Burnett Out Front program, where he said that, this is what his specific quote was: "There's a way to look at digital communications. I can't go into detail of what's done or how that's done or what's done, but I can tell you that no digital communication is secure." This was reported on all over the mainstream media at the time. The Guardian, Huffington Post, ACLU, Glenn Greenwald talked about it. And you can still find the transcript on the CNN website today. So let's go ahead and just watch that clip.
Let's turn our attention now to the phone call between Catherine Russell and her husband Tamerlan Tsarnaev. You said something very interesting on Aaron Burnett's show last night. You said that if Catherine Russell does not divulge the contents of this phone call, that the FBI had other methods finding out what was said. What did you mean by that?
Well, on the national security side of the house, in the federal government, we have assets. There's lots of assets at our disposal throughout the intelligence community, and also not just domestically but overseas. Those assets allow us to gain information and intelligence on things that we can't use ordinarily in a criminal investigation, but are used for major terrorism investigations or counterintelligence investigations.
And you're not talking about a voicemail, right? What are you talking about exactly?
I'm talking about all digital communications there's a way to look at digital communications in the past. And I can't go into detail of how that's done or what's done, but I can tell you that no digital communication is secure. And so these communications will be found out. The conversation will be known. And it's just a question of whether or not Catherine Russell decides to own up to what was said prior to that information being known or after the fact. And it'll be unfortunate for her if she doesn't own up to it completely and fully, because the facts of this case, the facts of her involvement and communication with her husband will be known.
And so what Tim Clemente said there took place, as I mentioned, May 2nd, 2013. This is just weeks before the Edward Snowden leaks became known to the public. And whatever your thoughts are about Edward Snowden and his trip to China and the NSA, the point is, Edward Snowden, you've also got other whistleblowers like Daniel Hale, William Binney, Russ Tice, and others who have made it perfectly clear to anybody who still doubts it. We are living in a surveillance state, and that's the United States, that's Western Europe, that's China, that's India, that's most of the quote-unquote developed democracies in our world that are surveillance states and have very little privacy to these days, and it is only going to get worse. And so this article, we're going to focus on those areas. Now, I want to make it clear that caveat that we started with just a moment ago with that video. You heard Tim Clemente said, no digital communication is secure. He said that 10 years ago. So just remember that in the back of your mind. If that's true, it could be true. It might be true. But that doesn't mean we should just acquiesce and just give up and say, okay, well, I have no privacy, so I'm not going to even bother trying. I think it means we need to be able to try, harder to, and because technology, we're in like a digital technological arms race. They create tools to crack encryption and crack passwords, and some guy out there is creating new layers of encryption. And of course, we've got quantum computing that could be really concerning and dangerous in terms of privacy. But for the most part, we're in that digital arms race. Now, what I wrote here was, it is of absolute importance that those who care about liberty make an effort to protect their privacy whenever possible. Even if only in principle, we are better served by flexing our rights to privacy than quietly acquiescing to the invasive surveillance that has become so normalized in our world. And while it is absolutely becoming increasingly difficult to maintain privacy beyond your front door, and in some cases, people have willingly given up privacy in their own homes, the tips below will at the very least slow down any potential hackers, law enforcement, or government agents. Again, understanding the caveat that we might be screwed when it comes to digital means in general. Number one, your digital footprint. Now this is kind of I just use this term kind of broadly, talking about your IP address, internet protocol addresses, which for those who don't know, this is logged by advertisers' websites, the NSA, under programs like Prism. Prism also gathers messaging data that you send via Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, and other tech companies. And there's another program called Upstream, which taps right into the backbone of the internet, the actual cables that connect and stream all the data that we use and that we send out to the internet. So you got a couple of programs like that are already tracking your IP address, and the IP address is a way to track your geographical location. Now, if somebody can track your geographic location, then they can find out quite a bit about you, obviously where you're at. They can look further into that in the age of the internet and start learning about your habits and your routines and your lists you're signed up for, newsletters you receive, things like that. It's not that difficult. So if somebody tracks this down, they can find your city, your postal code, and then from there, if they're really good, they might be able to find your birth date, your social security number, and this would be more on the hacker side of things. And there are basically innumerable additional ways in which the public, we, the people, have voluntarily, not me, I don't use apps, we're going to talk about that in a moment, but people have voluntarily given up their privacy. Yes, in some ways, just by participating in certain platforms, whether using the app or using the website, more and more you're getting the websites asking you, do you want to reject all this or accept all of it? But sometimes you don't have an option. If you want to use a website, the website's like, hey, this is what we're going to track, and you got to accept it if you want to use our services. And it is what it is. We make compromises in those ways. So a lot of times, it's not even that they're coming in and holding a gun to our head and taking away our privacy. We have just become so comfortable in a world, especially those my age and younger, 38 and younger, who have become used to sharing, and the older generations, they might consider it oversharing about our lives. So what can you do about it? First of all, recognize that it is impossible to avoid all types of surveillance and privacy invasions on the internet. Most people accept a certain level of invasion of privacy, like I just said, agreeing to terms of services, downloading apps without reading them. But there are some things you can do immediately. One of them would be stop using apps. And while they offer a level of convenience, I know it's easy, just instead of typing facebook.com or instagram.com or tiktok.com or whatever, people would rather just click a button and then it opens up and the whole world's there. And then also sometimes the apps, they don't really offer the same services. Like you might not have the same features if you're logging on a tablet or a computer or laptop that you do via the phone. So that's kind of another way that they want to incentivize you, socially engineer you to using the apps. But downloading the apps is the number one way to compromise your computer, tablet, or phone. And instead, as I said, just log in and you'll be subject to a lot less privacy attacks in general. Just that simple step. It's not going to get rid of everything, but you are definitely giving them way more access to your device, to your pictures, to your microphone, to your image, just all kinds of things that people just don't pay attention to. And they can use that to gather, to sell data on you, to make money off you, to sell you ads. Like there's a number of reasons that don't all involve like the government coming to kill you, that are just about your privacy, and you own that data and they're making money off you. So why not try to protect it? Another step, of course, would be to use a virtual private network, a VPN, which allows you to obfuscate your IP address and location. And this means that instead of looking like you're in Houston, Texas, you show up in Nigeria or, Greece or Mexico or wherever else you want to be. There are a lot of different VPNs out there. This is not an ad, by the way. I mean, maybe I need to reach out to Molvad, but the one I use and the one I support is Molvad VPN. That's linked in this article if you read the article, because they are decentralized, I would say fairly decentralized, and their philosophy seems to be aligned with privacy and securing that. Because you don't even have to use an email or a phone number to get their services. So you don't have to link your card to it, your name, your number, etc. You can pay anonymously with crypto if you want, like Monero. And there are also other technologists who are launching what they're calling DVPNs, decentralized VPNs. There's the Sentinel VPN, the Solar VPN, which are said to offer more protection and more security because their nodes and their networks are distributed and decentralized. So lots of cool stuff out there if you want to dive into it. Those are just a couple of basic tips for those who haven't become familiar with VPNs. Let's move on to number 2, social media. We just discussed the apps and how people are giving up privacy by using apps, and part of that, of course, social media. But social media is really the most obvious path that governments, law enforcement, and stalkers, let's be real, choose when it comes to gathering data on a target. This is because, again, we are voluntarily handing over our data in the form of likes, selfies, which are useful for facial recognition databases, and the daily documenting of our lives. And I do it too. I enjoy sharing like my travels and journeys and, having people comment and all that stuff. It's like a fun interaction. I get it. But I also understand that I've given up a lot of information about where I go, what I like, what I wear on a daily basis, just all kinds of little things that if somebody's trying to study you, or if they want to connect an AI and feed data to it and say, hey, tell me everything I need to know about this person and their habits, we're making it pretty easy. And in addition to sharing our own details, social media is also the home of hackers and scammers who steal identities, finances, and or can cause psychological harm. I've got people impersonating me on Telegram and elsewhere trying to scam some of my followers by claiming, hey, how are you doing? Are you ready for they'll say things like this that usually give it away. How are you doing today, Patriot? And most of my audience is like, yeah, that doesn't sound like Derrick. But nonetheless, those people are out there. So you got not only just the social media kind of invasiveness and the privacy, giving away all your information through likes and selfies and that data, but then hackers, people trying to steal your identity, your finances. And of course, if you got children, there's a whole nother layer of concern there, not even just privacy based, but absolutely, you need to teach your children, in my view, how to use the internet and how to take it seriously and take their privacy seriously. And finally, when it comes to social media, although it's not explicitly a privacy concern, 5th generation warfare, which is a term I'm going to be writing more and more about, and I know that you guys have heard me talk about it. I did an interview a few months back with Ryan, Cristian of Last American Vagabond, and Whitney Webb. We talked about this. You can find it on my website. But 5th generation warfare, which is basically just the next generation of warfare. So not just guns and bullets on the battlefield, but as we've seen it going, it's hackers. That's been a part of it for a while, like hackers and drones and things for the last couple decades here, the last decade at least. But we're moving even more beyond that, where the internet and social media itself is the battlefield. I think psyops like QAnon are part of 5th generation warfare, as well as using the internet to use planted or fake stories, as well as compliant journals and fake journalists and fact checkers, and surveillance, which puts all of us in basically this mental and physical matrix, right? So 5th generation warfare isn't just the internet spying on you. It's the internet is a war on your mind. I mean, here's Alex Jones being right. It's an info war. So what can we do about it? Well, the most easy option, but not the most popular choice, is to opt out of as much of this stuff as possible. You could avoid using social media altogether. There's nothing in our human handbook that says we are required to live lives on social media. It's quite popular with, again, my generation and older and younger, all of the humans in general. But we don't have to. We could avoid social media. We could limit our use of websites, which require private information to sign up. However, this is going to be an extreme option for most people. So if you want to use social media and you want to do it in a way that respects your privacy, my suggestion would be to do it outside of big tech. And what does that mean? Despite the near monopoly status of Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, X, Instagram, etc., there are many, many alternative social media sites, as you guys know. Some of you are probably watching this video on some of these quote-unquote alternative media sites. Everything from Odyssey and Rockfin, to BitChute, although BitChute is my least favorite platform because there's so many Nazis on and racists, like real, actual racists and Nazis on there. I just block them all. I don't really care. But Odyssey, Rockfin, BitChute, Hive. Hive is a blockchain-based platform. You got PeerTube, and I listed a few, Minds, Mastodon. So all these sites are out there. Now, of course, if your goal is to reach the masses, then you kind of limit yourself because the masses are on the big tech platforms. I get it. This is a battle I've had within myself for a decade. So now, or for at least for the last 7 years. So I'm still on Facebook, unfortunately. I've gone back and forth. I've deleted accounts and come back, but that is where the vast majority of my traffic's going. But that's a whole nother conversation. Each of these alternative social media platforms have different functionalities. Some of them are made just for video. Some of them are made for sharing posts and video, audio, etc. But whatever it is, you can share your thoughts to friends and family and content to them without sacrificing your privacy. And then when it comes to messaging and keeping in touch with people in general, the most common apps used around the world are Meta's Messenger, Facebook Messenger, and WhatsApp, which are owned. They also, include Instagram in there. Messenger is Facebook and Instagram. If you want, though, an alternative way to communicate with friends and family that doesn't require to give up your whole history, especially, using these new threads and all this stuff that they're launching, which they're basically just tracking every message. And if you've never done this, by the way, there's something called Google Takeout. You can actually go, if you've got a Google account, you can go download your entire Google file and then delete your account and stop using them. And then download your entire Facebook file and everything that they have. And I'm telling you, you will be creeped out to see they're going to have images and things you forgot you sent. They're going to have messages, every single message you ever sent. Yes, including the dirty ones will be in there. And even sometimes when I did my file, I got images that weren't mine from friends that somehow it pulled from their accounts and gave to me. None of them were anything, that they were probably embarrassed about, but nonetheless, it is pretty disturbing when you get your Google Takeout folder and download your whole Facebook file. But you could use other alternatives like Session, Status, or XMPP, and I linked in this article to all three of those where you can learn more about them. Of course, Telegram is a popular messaging app, and it offers one-on-one encryption chats, just one-on-one, but not as a group or outside of that, and that's only on phone too. So somebody like me, it's not an option. It's not a complete privacy solution. But if you insist on using big tech platforms, and as I said, I'm one of them because I try to reach people, refer back to my first section on Digital Trail. Stop using apps. It's that simple. When you download the big tech apps or the app for your local gym, for example, as Maryam and I found out, you are often giving away permission to access your device, your camera, microphones, pictures, and sometimes even messages, as I mentioned. And, Maryam uses the Above phone, which I'll talk about in just a moment, where that's our next topic, the phones. And it's a privacy-based phone. And we have apps in there that you can basically scan any new app you're considering downloading, and it'll tell you all the trackers and here's the hidden things and whatnot. And so our gym is, because everything's going digital, they're just oh, you don't even have to talk to a person. Just come up and scan your phone, the QR code, and you're in, right? I'm okay, let me think about that. I don't really like doing that kind of stuff. And I looked it up, and Maryam and I saw, they want access to all kinds of stuff. So we refuse to do that. So we just walk in and wait for a human being and say, hey, can I check in with my phone number instead of the freaking QR code? And nobody gives us any shit or anything. It's easy. It's simple enough. You can make changes. You can actually change your behavior instead of just participating. So do yourself a favor and skip the apps. Go old school, go in the browser, type the address, and get to your social media and log in. This alone will greatly reduce the amount of data that you're sharing. Now let's move on to smartphones. The rest of this list is actually focused on the smart world, smartphones, smart cities, the smart grid. Let me see what else we got. Yeah, so we'll talk about all that because that's really where things are going. One level is okay, you got your phone, you got the internet, but what about the world around us that's quickly growing with facial recognition cameras and license plate readers and all kinds of fun stuff? Well, smartphones, like most technological advancements for the last few decades, including the internet itself, started out as tools for the military. These tools were designed by the U.S. Department of Defense under the direction of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And we already touched on the Snowden leaks, but you could also go back to the Church Committee hearings in the 70s, specifically 1975, when we found out that the NSA and other U.S. spy agencies were spying on Americans' phone calls. This widespread adoption, of course, the widespread adoption of cell phones, now personal phones, only accelerated government's data collection on us. And now that phones have gone from just being a phone to an all-in-one machine, which also just happens to make calls, they are really a treasure trove of personal data, and it's something we all need to be aware about. So again, you can opt out. That's always going to be my first piece of advice when we say, well, what can we do? You can opt out. You don't have to have a cell phone if you don't want. Yes, I know it seems necessary for many of our lives, but I promise you it's not. It just takes a little bit of extra time and effort. I don't have a phone. My girlfriend, my partner, she has a phone, so obviously I use it. I get the benefit of it when we're together. But when she's not around, I use my computer. I look up directions for places I want to go. I pull out this old piece of technology called a pen and a pad, and I write things down, and then I go on a bike ride or whatever, and I take a bus, and I figure it out, and I get places, and sometimes I have to sit around and wait, or I have to ask questions. Imagine that, talking to human beings. And I get there, though. I make it. So it is possible. But if you're not ready for that extreme path, consider at least rethinking your relationship with the devices. Do you need to take your phone to the bathroom every single time? Or for me, my laptop, do I need to carry the laptop to the bathroom? Is it really necessary? It's like it's got this freaking pull on our brains, like I gotta be close to it. Zombie. All right, so do you need to take it on your walk with your dog or your kids? Do you have to have all the apps with notifications on, which constantly interrupt your own thoughts and your own, just daily life? And do you really need or even use all the apps on your phone or on your computer? These are just a few simple questions to get you started on reframing how you relate to digital technology, because we have to be careful to prevent this technology from controlling our habits and our actions, because in many ways, social media and the internet are already affecting our mental health and our sanity, depending on how much time we spend on these devices. I know that I easily spend 10 to 12 hours a day either staring at my computer doing stuff like this, or researching, talking to people, just doing nothing, whatever, and I mix it up. I go on bike rides, I get out of here, but still, I can feel that it has a pull on me, and that's something I want to be stronger than and smarter than. I want to be smarter than the so-called smart devices. Now, if you can't give up your cell phone addiction, consider at least purchasing a smartphone which actually respects your privacy. There are several companies that I'm sure you guys have come across over the last few years that are offering a variety of services. These include de-Googled phones, which have been built from the ground up. And there are other phones that have just, they got their own operating systems that you'll have to do your own research to decide whether they, deliver on what they promise. But the only company that I can personally vouch for and that I have vouched for is the Above phone, which is founded by Ramiro Romani, who is just a good friend of mine. He's involved in the Freedom Cell Network. He's co-producer of the Greater Reset as well. And Ramiro's company, here, let's open this up. You can see that Ryan here, Cristian interviewed Ramiro back in, actually, it's been 2 years, when he was first launching back in 2021. And you can see here, abovephone.com, replace big tech with your private ecosystem. And then they recently are actually launching the Above book. So now they're actually doing pre-orders for laptops that have been, again, similarly stripped of all the spyware and loaded with a custom Linux system that has all the tools and things you need, and they've got customer service and stuff like that. So check them out. So there's stuff like that, and then again, as I mentioned, you got VPNs, you got other things so you don't have to necessarily use a Google phone or an Apple phone, right out of the box filled with all the spyware. You can de-Google it yourself, or you can work with a company like Ramiro's and Above Phone. You can check out some of these other companies that are popping up. You have options. We have more options than we've ever had in our lives. All right, moving on. Smart devices. Again, now we're getting bigger, broader picture. It's not just a smartphone. It's a smart device. And what does that mean? You got a smart fridge, smart washer, smart toaster, smart vacuum cleaner, smart shoes, smart kids' toys. That's the next layer. We're going to have to get into that soon. So many things. And it's not just those things. It's the appliances. It's the house. It's literally your entire smart house. That's what they're kind of calling it now, right? And you got the smart TVs. Well, we know when it comes to the smart TVs that they've been spying on homeowners since at least 2015. That's been documented. We also know that the CIA has the ability to spy on you through your smart TV under a program called Weeping Angel. And then you got the various virtual digital home assistants, Echo, Siri, etc., that are all listening to you all the time. Do you guys get that yet? They're listening to you all the time, not just when you say your keywords or trigger words or whatever. They're freaking listening to you all the time. And then I saw this really great report from privacy researcher Naomi Brockwell that I linked here, which is all about the ways that smart cars are listening and spying on drivers. In fact, I reported on this back in 2020, that companies at the CES 2020 conference, they show their plans for making use of the surprising amounts of data which are gathered by the newer model vehicles, including Amazon, Intel, Qualcomm, and BlackBerry, were all part of these companies seeking partnerships with automakers and who are also searching for ways to monetize the data gathered by the vehicles. You think that OnStar system's not listening to you, that Tesla you're driving, you think it's not listening to you? Those companies are collecting that data. They're working with these big tech companies. They're going to sell that data somewhere so that your car can give you customized ads, so that your cool, fancy big windows in the Tesla or whatever can have an ad displayed to you based on conversations you've had recently. And it's going to be so hip and cool and convenient, people are going to freaking eat it all up probably. So here's another little point about the smart cars. There was an article I found that this guy was talking about how vehicle manufacturers are able to see and hear what you're doing based on that. And they said that anytime you plug a smartphone into a vehicle, the vehicle will likely copy personal data. This is with new phones, of course. He said, quote, among the trove of data points were unique identifiers for my phone and a detailed log of phone calls from the previous week. There was a long list of contacts, right down to people's addresses, emails, and even photos. The vehicle also collected an acceleration and braking style, beaming back reports to General Motors over an always-on internet connection. Coming next, face data used to personalize the vehicle and track driver attention so they can look at your face to make sure you're watching the road. Don't be looking away. So if you look down, they say, excuse me, sir, stop texting and drive, or something, that's helpful but creepy. And yeah, where are we going? Another smart device is these doorbell cameras. Ring is the most popular one, which is now owned by Amazon. I've reported on this and I linked it here that Amazon actually has their own facial recognition program called Recognition, spelled with a K. And they have been working with police departments to integrate recognition, the facial recognition program, with the Ring doorbell cameras that people are voluntarily putting up that not only see their front doorstep, but see the neighbor's house across the street. And through this, the people are voluntarily creating a neighborhood police state. They are eliminating their own privacy. So what can we do about it? Because this is where it gets more difficult. You can't stop your neighbor from getting a smart doorbell camera. You can't, stop the drones outside and all these other things that are beyond our control. So if you want a new vehicle, if you want it with all the new features and the must-have stuff, then I guess just know that you're doing so and that all those things are going to involve giving up a little bit of your privacy. But my biggest recommendation here is to opt out of these things. When it comes to the phone, okay, I get it. You think it's necessary. Maybe you still want to use social media or whatever, but don't put smart TVs and Echoes and Ring doorbell cameras and smart fridges and smart toasters and freaking smart vacuums. And don't put smart children's toys that are watching and tracking them because they're going to tell you it's going to give you all sorts of useful data. They're trying to get you to build your own digital prison and you're doing it. Personally, I don't believe we should be normalizing surveillance in our homes, especially for the younger generations. And I think the home should be the one place where children can feel free to express themselves without fear of strangers listening. And that's really what it's about for those who don't know. So if you're going to have those devices, at least have an honest conversation with your kids about privacy and the importance of it, and let them be aware of what might be listening to them or tracking them in their own home. Now, the final piece of this puzzle is smart cities. We started out by talking about your digital trail, your digital footprint, then social media, smartphones, smart devices, and now we hear smart cities and the smart grid in general. All of this is part of the 5G, 6G, and beyond smart grid. This is part of the tokenization and the just sort of commodification of all life, the digitization of all life. It's about putting sensors all over the place, cameras, streetlights, smart vehicles. They're going to tell us our clothes. They're going to tell us it's good for the environment. It's good for the planet. This is called the Internet of Nano Things, the Internet of Bodies, the Internet of Humans, the Internet of Senses, many names. This is all connected to the central bank digital currencies, social credit scores, 5Gs, and as I've been showing recently, even things like digital billboards in Houston, and self-driving taxis are coming now. I mean, they're working hard to be turning Houston into a smart city, and this is happening all over. Clearly, the plans for smart cities are advancing, and these cities like Houston are going to become privacy nightmares. So what can we do about it? Well, for one, it's important to recognize that the Smart City Agenda is part of Agenda 2030, part of the Sustainable Development Goals outlined by the United Nations. And I think the key is to exit these cities whenever possible. However, I know that for many, many people, leaving the city is not a viable option. And in that case, that means you need to get active. I mean, you can just sit by and do nothing if you choose, but I think you'd be selling out the coming generations. Why not get active and actually try to stop this? And to do that, you need to stop the implementation of smart city technology at city council, town council, school board meetings, tower commissions, wireless commissions, county commissioner meetings, etc. This is where those things are taking place. Attend meetings, organize in your community, run for local office if you think it will help. Stop these policies before they even begin. Because if we do nothing but complain on the internet, which is what a lot of you are doing, or just give in to apathy and be blackpilled, we're so cool, nothing can, there's nothing we can do, we're only failing ourselves and we are failing future generations. We're setting them up for a world without privacy, without liberty. And I believe every free person of free heart, mind, and able body, and even if you're not an able body, do what you can online, should be doing what they can to get out of these systems as soon as possible and to begin supporting building parallel systems. This is what I talk about in my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, which you can download for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. It's been translated to Spanish. It's been translated to French. The German copy is coming out soon. The Japanese copy will be out next year. There's an audiobook. Check it out, especially the updated version. This gives you all the tools you need to get started. I believe this is the most conducive way to save privacy and liberty for future generations so that we can remain free from these digital prisons. Now let's circle all the way back and remember where we started with Tim Clemente's words from 10 years ago. I can tell you that no digital communication is secure. So the last piece of advice, act as if that's true. And if you really need to communicate something that is illegal or that you really want private, do it in person. Get rid of all the cell phones and computers, put them in another room, get rid of all the smart devices, and make sure you're truly alone. That's the only way. If there's something you are worried that will get you in trouble, whether illegal or not, and you're really that worried about it, then do not send it through a digital means, through a privacy app, encryption app, with a VPN or anything, or deep web, etc. Just don't, because we can't guarantee that it is private or secure. All right, guys, in my mind, if we don't stand up for our privacy and security, we will have nothing. Privacy and liberty are directly connected. If we want liberty, which I want, individual and collective liberty for everybody, we have to be free to think, to have our own conversations, to have our own thoughts. We have to be free to organize. And if anything, 1984 and books like it and real world circumstances have taught us that you must have liberty if you're going to stay free. If we don't have, we must have privacy if we're going to have stay free, and if we're going to have liberty. If we don't have privacy, we're not free at all. And we are the only ones that can fight for it, can preserve it. We're living in a time now where most people, especially the younger generations, have already acquiesced and given up the idea of privacy. They don't even understand it or think that it's worth. I'm not doing anything wrong. I have nothing to hide. We've all heard these things. But if we want to keep it alive, we have to stand, we have to fight, we have to resist everywhere we can through non-compliance and by continuing to educate people. Otherwise, the coming generations will be born into these smart city prisons and there won't be another option for them. I refuse to give that to my nieces and my nephews and to any potential future unborn children that I might have. And I hope that you will continue to fight as well. Thank you guys for listening. I want to remind you, if you want to support me, the best way to do so is to buy my books. Go to theconsciousresistance.com. You can look at our shop, see books and t-shirts. Buy How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, the Conscious Resistance Trilogy, the Holistic Self-Assessment. That's the best way to support me, as well as if you want to support us by buying some Conscious Resistance shirts. We got lots of cool designs. We got some new designs coming up soon, including Ask Me Why I Don't Use Bluetooth. Stay tuned for that one. You can also sign up at buymeacoffee.com/Derrick Broze for monthly support or one-time support. And you can sign up at derrickbroze.substack to support me on a monthly or annually basis so I can continue to do this. And I greatly appreciate anybody who chooses to do so. Thank you guys for watching and for listening. Remember to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com to find all of our latest content. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free, my friends.